Friday night, we got a great show for you. We're going to figure out why was Palpatine so powerful. And then we're also going to look at maybe a solo sequel. We're going to do a movie or a series. We got 15 Emmy nominations for The Mandalorian. And then we're going to pit the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy on the best duels. And it's all coming at you right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for the show. So I missed you last week, man.
Yeah, man, I missed you too, man.
I mean, it was, I carried the torch, but it was kind of tough, I got to tell you.
Yeah, man, I'm back and ready to lend some assistance and ready to talk some more Star Wars. We got some cool stuff to talk about, especially one of our favorite villains of all time. Good old Darth Sidious.
Good old Darth Sidious. And as usual, if you guys are watching us live, you can chat at any point. So you ready to get into this?
Let's go.
All right, let's do it. All right, so on our first segment, what do we have?
We have, from a certain point of view, and we want to know, why is Darth Sidious so powerful?
All right, so what actually, first we gotta set the stage for this now.
Right.
So what was it that was happening or going on in your mind or whatever that made you actually think about it? Because usually when you say stuff like this, it's because you saw something or something prompted you, Because, I mean, this kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, usually like for the last, I don't know, month or so, we've been talking about various news stories or things that have just been coming out or whatever, but then I saw that you popped this on, and I'm like, where did this come from?
Well, here's the thing. So I oftentimes will look at, different forums, and, I will have conversations with friends and stuff about Star Wars. And one of the bigger questions was like, okay, of course, the initial question was Palpatine more powerful than Yoda?
Right.
And, once again, I always have to say it's from a certain point of view because
I see what you did there.
Because you have to look at it from the perspective of, at the time of the original trilogy, you could say maybe they were more evenly matched. But if you're talking about the prequel times, Palpatine was stronger. Mm-hmm. So, and then that led into like, okay, well, what made Palpatine so much stronger? Because, of course, Palpatine being a human, Yoda not being a human, and he hit with him being so old, he had more time to master the Force, of course. So why did Yoda have such a hard time with Sidious? Is there something about him that made him more powerful? And so that's where we kind of got into that whole conversation. And then I saw some things online. I was like, well, let me go check online and see what other people have said about this particular. And it's one of those questions that's actually kind of reoccurring ever so often. And once again, everybody kind of has they weigh in with their own opinions as far as why is Palpatine so powerful. So I decided to bring it to everybody else.
All right. Well, then what do you think? What are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts are this. I think if you're looking at it from the perspective, and these are the facts that we can just go by. One, I would say because of his master, Plagueis. Plagueis being one of those, I don't even know if I can't even call him a human, but he was like a humanoid, I guess, if you will. But he was definitely not completely human. So his species was allowed to live long, have a long life, much like Yoda, which means he had more time to actually master and look into the Force on the dark side, which means if Palpatine, who was already talented, and the way they kind of describe Palpatine, he was almost like Anakin. So as far as natural raw talent. Mm-hmm. So if you're taking that natural raw talent and then you have a master who's had the time to actually go down through the years and really just truly master a lot of things from the dark side, that can, now he can impart that into somebody who's just naturally talented. But now Palpatine doesn't have to work so hard as to try to get this information when your master is providing it for you. So that's one. Then two, of course, you have, at the time of the prequels, the light side was being diminished, and because, you had the rise of the Sith coming up, so that he had that to his advantage as well. And then I will also say, with the death with Order 66, taking place, now you have less people who can actually rise up against you. So now the light side is even diminished even further. And then on top of that, I believe he was also able to feed off of Vader, because Vader being so powerful in the Force, and now that he was tipping to the dark side, they kind of feed off each other, no different than light side users.
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, well, and I mean, obviously, I pretty much agree with that assessment. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, first of all, you have to figure in his raw talent, right? Because Palpatine was a guy that, much like Anakin, and that's actually a really good analogy. I never really thought about it that way before, but yeah, he was a lot like Anakin in that sense, like the dark side version. But the thing that strikes me as odd about Palpatine is that he just seemed to be dark from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like he was never, ever a nice guy. I mean, like you never have... First of all, we don't have a whole lot of backstory on him. Well, which I do find interesting.
Yeah, and I often wonder, because we know the Jedi, they actually seek out, Force-sensitive students, at birth, pretty much. So I wonder if that same goes for the Sith as well. Because if they did that, then if they saw that or sensed that he had this natural raw talent, they're like, yeah, we got to get this guy before the Jedi do, because in that way we could really, truly become powerful.
Yeah.
And with the rule of two, that's another thing, too, is that you don't have to compete for attention.
Well, but some people think that that's the whole reason, though, why the Sith were never as powerful, or the dark side was never as powerful, because they didn't have a whole lot. Once they knocked it down to the rule of two, I mean, there's only so much, right? Because you basically had the master to have the power, the apprentice to crave it, or,
right.
However the saying goes. And I mean, I just think that it's one of those things that you got to wonder... Well, actually, this could go into a lot of different directions, because, one, if there's only two dark side guys, are they amassing more of that? So, like, if you have a bunch of light side people, it's kind of like if you plug too much stuff in, the power goes down kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So you got to wonder, is that...
And that's exactly kind of how I looked at things. Like, if you look at it from the dark side perspective, you have one person that you really have to, that has your attention. It's no different than, like, when we were teaching. It's easier to teach one kid versus a classroom of 30.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, now we can pour and we can see the growth and development. We can fix things immediately. No, don't do it this way, do it that way. Their growth kind of goes exponentially, because you have that one-on-one attention, as opposed to now you got to try to cater to everybody else, and you have to try to... And that's the thing, with the Jedi, they were trying to keep peace in the galaxy, so they had like jobs. They really were out here like trying to police things, and they had other things that they kind of had to do, and they were meditating on the Force and the will, and they were trying to seek out little kids, and they're trying to teach them, and you have all this stuff.
Yeah, kind of a perpetuating thing, but and that's the thing. What are the Sith doing? All they seem to be doing is just trying to amass power and take over stuff. It's
exactly.
Like they don't really have that same, I guess... Like, it's not really a noble purpose.
Right.
But it's not even really a purpose, because it's almost like they're
conquerors. I mean, they're basically just...
Yeah, they're basically conquerors, exactly.
Yeah, so when that's your own... And that's what I'm saying, you have... And that's why even when you listen to Obi-Wan, he says, only Sith deal in absolutes. Like, they're just driven. They're about one thing and one thing only. And that's what makes them so powerful, because you can... It's like taking a light and just focusing it on like one particular thing, and now it's going to be completely strong. So I think that's partially one of the reasons, well, a big reason as to why Palpatine was as strong as he was, because I often think about, what if Anakin was Yoda's apprentice? Because it also depends on, like I said, once again, your apprentice. I mean, your master too.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And in fact, you and I have often said, and I think other Star Wars fans have theorized, and you guys, feel free to chat in any time, but I think that if Qui-Gon had been the master for Anakin instead of Obi-Wan, I think there might have been a totally different outcome there.
And that's the thing too, because you take on your master's personality.
Right.
So it's no different than, me working with you for years, like I started to, people would tell me like, you sound like Eric. I'm like, really? So it's just one of those.
Very good. Or not so good. It depends.
It depends on who you're talking to, but yeah, I mean,
but do you actually think though that Anakin took on Obi-Wan's personality traits though?
Yeah, eventually, because you saw the growth. Like before, like for example, one of the cool things when the opening of Revenge of the Sith, when they were in the elevator, and he's like, oh yeah, he's like, well, what do you think? He's like, I suggest patience. That's something you would never hear from Anakin.
Well, yeah.
Or like
I'll go along with that.
Or
that is
when
definitely
or
something.
when they fought Dooku, he was like, this time we'll take him. He's like, yeah, I was about to say that, and it's kind of like, okay, like he gets it now. He's kind of like our partner Ed. Like, okay, for years Ed was very ambitious and he just wanted to go out there and do stuff, but now he's starting to understand. No, okay, maybe we'll tame it down a little bit. But now you kind of understand.
But that's like a natural growth thing, though. That's not necessarily taking on somebody. Now, granted, he's following Obi-Wan's example in that point, but he was also in the Jedi Order, though, right? So he could be following, for all we know, like Ki-Adi-Mundi or something.
Well, I mean, and I think that's one of the things they pick up things from everybody. There's times where he would pick up things from Mace. There's things where he might pick up from. In the Clone Wars, you can see it a lot too, and that was a cool thing too, because even going back to the whole Palpatine discussion, you really kind of start to see, and I kind of made a correlation as I was thinking about this. So, Rise of Skywalker, the moment where he had Rey sit on that little rock, and he said, "Okay, reach out, and what do you see?" I see the island. I see life. I feel.
Oh, you mean The Last Jedi?
Last Jedi. Sorry.
I was about to say, when did he do that in The Rise of Skywalker?
Right.
Is that the Lucas cut?
Might be. So yeah, sorry, Last Jedi. And he's okay. What do you see? I see the island. I see this, and that. Blah blah blah. And then later on, I think it was, I said, I don't see you. I didn't feel you. And that was one of those moments, like, wow, okay. Luke blocked himself off from the Force. But you see that Palpatine did that way back in the Clone Wars, because in the cartoon, they kept saying that like it was like a vacuum around him. Mm-hmm. Like they didn't feel the Force around him. And it's like, well, how is that possible?
See, now, isn't that like some sort of an alarm that should go off in everybody's head? Like, and I think that's why this guy who's supposed to be this innocent, well, I don't know about innocent, but at least more benign politician. Mm-hmm. It's like, don't they think it's a little weird that there's a Force vacuum here?
It's like maybe, around him we can't feel anything. Maybe we should
check this out.
Yeah, and it's like, well, why is that? But then at the same time, they wanted to, and that's one of the things is like we have to be careful because he's the Supreme Chancellor at this point, and like we can't accuse or we can't, investigate him too heavily because it's like, well, why are you investigating? And especially from a power to which no one else understands but a Jedi. So the general public wouldn't really understand that. Mm-hmm. And Palpatine knew that. And so I think that was one of those things where you really start to see how powerful Palpatine was. It's just the fact that he was able to hide himself in front of them in plain sight. And it was just amazing to me because he would sometimes, when he would go into his, Sidious mode, whether he was talking via hologram or whatnot, he's clearly like using the dark side at this point because he would choke people. He would, when he popped up on Maul and Savage, like, and he started going to town. I mean, he's fully using the dark side at that point. Did the Jedi even sense that? That this all of a sudden this great power of dark just popped up out of nowhere.
That's the thing that always mystified me about the whole thing is why didn't they, when he would do that, why didn't they sense something? Mm-hmm. They had to sense some darkness, but then again, it's kind of like you said, he was blocking the whole thing from him. So it's like,
and that's what I'm saying. It's kind of interesting because he would feel stuff in the Force, but they couldn't. Like he would use, because that's how he knew like Maul was back, was because he felt Maul's presence in the Force, and that's why he has like, okay, I can't have two apprentices out running around and then he's got an apprentice. So these guys got to go.
Yeah, right. Because now it's almost like, wait a minute, there's too many Sith out there.
Yeah, exactly.
I got to deal with this because if they all decided to band together, they could go up against him, and he would see that as a total threat. And I could.
So the fact that he sensed that means that he had to tap into the Force. But he's still, you see what I'm saying? Like, he's still blocking
he's still, exactly.
Like,
he's
how
still
are you doing that? And
right.
that's amazing to me, because that just really shows, like, supreme power. You know, and that's what I think a lot of people miss, is how powerful Palpatine truly was.
Well, sure, and that's basically what this comes down to, because, obviously everybody's thinking of, there's the Force lightning, there's
the choking.
There's things that Palpatine does that, and he does it very, very quickly and very well, like how fast he dispatched all those Jedi Masters in Revenge of the Sith. But it's kind of these more subtle things that you're bringing up that definitely really, it's like, are you guys really thinking about how powerful this guy
exactly.
is?
And the fact that you're hiding it from an entire council of masters. Like, one, you have a Grand Master, plus Mace Windu is pretty powerful, but then you got like 10 other people that are like on this council.
Right, and that's just a Jedi council. That's not even counting like all the other Jedi Knights and then the Padawans and, this whole plethora of Force users.
Yeah.
You've got the Dathomir witches, the Night Sisters. You've got like all these other people that are running around, and it's like nobody suspects this.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, when you really stop and like analyze everything, you're like, geez. And I think that's one of the reasons that made me think about this whole topic, was actually completing the Clone Wars cartoon once again.
Oh, wait, you actually finished it?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So it's just kind of like...
Wait, did you watch season 7 again?
Yeah.
I'm really slacking. I'm still like on 4. I think I'm toward the end of 4. But...
Don't feel bad. I still haven't finished the books yet. So.
Oh, yeah, you knew that's where I was going.
Of course.
Wait, both of them? Jedi Lost and
both of them.
Queen's Peril?
Queen's Peril, yep.
Okay.
But...
interestingly, I think the latest comic, by the way, the Darth Vader comic, I just read it. If you guys haven't read it yet, the new Darth Vader series is really cool. This time he goes back, he visits Naboo.
Yeah, I've been hearing some stuff about that.
Yeah, man, it's pretty cool. But it's Dorme, I think was her name.
Yeah.
She basically came back, and she wants to investigate, Vader's death. I'm not going to give away too many spoilers or anything, but it's really cool. Like, this latest issue is really, really good.
Okay.
But she mentions about how she's like the shadow, and like there's like little references that now make me want to read that book even more, because I have a feeling now this latest comic series is directly tying in with Queen's Shadow and Queen's Peril.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said before, like with those the handmaidens, now you kind of look at them as like, oh, okay, like they're really like, it's like the shell game with them. So they like each get a chance to play the role of the queen, depending on what the situation is. So if there's a thing that kind of requires more empathy and diplomacy, there's somebody for that. There's somebody who needs to deal with something you're trying to figure out someone is lying.
So they all basically have like different
functions
or attributes or something.
Attributes, that because they knew that this one person didn't have it all, but you find a group.
How far in the book are you?
Like I was still like that. I'm about 75% done.
All right, well that's not bad.
Yeah. So.
But again, I mean, going back to this, it really is incredible just how powerful Palpatine really is when you factor in all these other areas that you don't normally think of. The fact that, number one, he's hiding his identity. He's creating a vacuum in the Force that nobody seems to think is weird.
Right.
He's basically has this whole like master plan that he's able to carry out as a singular guy, mind you. Manipulate his way. And this isn't even all the canon stuff that's basically like, when you actually introduce this whole thing, I went, well, let me go on Star Wars, .com and go into their data bank or whatever. And yeah, he was just, I mean, he had a lot of raw talent right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Even before Plagueis got him. So that was interesting. But what I would like to see is, he's one guy I would actually like to see an origin story.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Usually I'm like, what? I don't like these whole origin story things. I want to see further adventures of not, okay, let's, go back to like Walrus Man's origin and, or have Snaggletooth, a Star Wars story. I don't really need to go and see like every single person. But Palpatine, I think Palpatine would be a really compelling choice.
Well, yeah, definitely, because you kind of want to see like how did he get his start, one, and then what was his training like, because he's ruthless. Like,
well, but even before that though, I would like to see, why is he so evil? I mean, it's kind of like there doesn't seem to be any point, at least anything that I've read. Now, granted, I did not read, what was it, the Plagueis books or something that are now legends.
Mm-hmm.
But even if they don't count as canon, at least that would give you a particular viewpoint.
Right.
I've never read any of that. But to my knowledge, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't actually think that there was anything that went back prior to maybe his Sith training. Like, what was... Again, I don't need to do the whole, like, Jake Lloyd is little Palpatine now. Well, I mean, he's, like, 29 or something. But, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like I don't need to see, like, the Palpatine as a little boy thing. But I wouldn't mind seeing maybe in his teen years, like, it doesn't have to be a whole movie based on this, but at least show me where... Yeah, I don't think he was raised to be evil.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, he could have very well have been. Because, like I said...
Well, depending on who his parents were.
Well, not just that, but I'm saying, like, no different than the Jedi who are looking out. They have people, scouts, who go out and seek out kids who are newborns, who have Force ability, or who are...
So your theory is maybe, like, some evil Sith guy or some dark user basically got a hold of him almost like as an infant and raised him to be horrible. Well, that could be, but I want to see that.
And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that that would make more sense to me, honestly, because if you have this natural, like I said, no different than Anakin. Like, they showed, Anakin was like, what, 8 years old or something like that in Phantom Menace, but they could tell right out the gate that he's flying pods and no other human can do it. So, I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, so you're seeing that that natural talent was already there, and he can see things. Qui-Gon already knew. Like, okay. And that's what made him so curious, because he's like, all right, I haven't felt, the Force so strong. He's like, and then, of course, when he tells Obi-Wan, it's like, well, his midichlorian count is like over 20,000 or something. Like, wow.
Higher than Yoda.
It's like higher than Yoda. So it's just like, well, wait a minute.
Makes you wonder what Palpatine's midichlorian count is.
Well, and that's one of the things that a lot of people said. His is pretty high. His is almost like Anakin's. That's why I said those two mirror a lot. And that's why he kind of like sought Anakin out, was because he knew that, like, okay, if I could get him, he could be another me. And that's truly like his legacy in that way.
Yeah, he did definitely have I hesitate to say this, but he had kind of a soft spot for Vader.
Mm-hmm.
Vader was a little bit different for him, but I think part of that, though, was because he was the quote-unquote chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, no matter what people think of that prophecy, I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, there's theories. Well, was Rey really the chosen one? Or was, all this other stuff? And then, of course... We've said a million different times that there's multiple chosen ones. That prophecy, I don't actually think is just one Force user for all time.
Right.
I think that out of every generation, there's a chosen one that rises up and brings balance to the Force.
Exactly.
And I mean, I think if people start looking at it like that, things would make a little bit more sense to them, and it wouldn't be so weird.
And that's one of the things Yoda even brought up. Like, he kept saying, like, okay, and that's why even Dooku... And see, that's why, to your point, when you were talking about Qui-Gon before, Qui-Gon being the student of Dooku, Dooku being the student of Yoda, you can kind of see, like, okay, yes, Yoda, of course, was aware of these prophecies and things like that, but he wasn't focused on those. Mm-hmm. Dooku took a very big interest in that, in the prophecies that were out. And Qui-Gon kind of picked that up from Dooku, and that's kind of where. So when he encountered Anakin, it was like, oh, this might be what we were talking about.
Yeah, they put two and two together. But I'm glad you brought up Dooku, because he's a good example of a dark side user who wasn't necessarily inherently evil.
No,
he just turned away from the Jedi, and then he started to crave power, and then he took the path. But see, that's what I think is different between somebody like him or Maul or any of these other guys or even Anakin, right? So Anakin, once he became Darth Vader, was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Pretty evil. But he didn't start out that way.
Right.
In fact, he started out very noble and wanting to actually save everybody. He was just doing it from more of a selfish point of view, and that's why it opened him up to the dark side. So when you factor that in, I think that's something that's absent from Palpatine, though. You know, Palpatine never really seemed to have any kind of a noble intent. He wasn't doing this as like a means to an end. He just was a really bad guy.
Well, I mean, that's like you said, it's only as far as we've known of him. I mean, like, if you
and that's why I think that there should be an origin story.
An origin story, definitely. Because, like I said, if you want to, technically our first encounter with him is, of course, Empire, but like in the timeline, Phantom Menace, and he was just a senator at that point. But even then, he already had his agenda. He already knew what he wanted to do.
He was working, man.
Yeah, he already had it.
Like,
the plan was in motion.
if you do a vote of no confidence.
Yeah, exactly. And then he
then
already
we can
had
elect
Maul.
a stronger leader. And what was funny about that was like he's going on and trying to make it, well, maybe you should be I don't know if I could. You know, I mean, it's like, come on, dude. I mean, we know where you're going with
this.
You know?
Exactly. He's already got Maul running around, you know.
Sure.
And, you know, so it's one of those things where from the time we even come into the knowledge of Palpatine, you know, I mean, it was cool just to see what he was like, what he looked like before.
Oh, I know. Before he was all like mangled up and stuff. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought that was so wild.
Yeah.
You know, especially, I think if I'm not mistaken, the first time that you see him in the Phantom Menace, it was in that little hologram when they were being attacked, and I don't know. I just, you know, and it was just kind of like, whoa. And she's like, Senator Palpatine or whatever, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty trippy to see him just all in this regal senator gear with just a normal face and, you know, normal hair and stuff. And yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. But if you go back and you actually check some of the more official sources, easily like a few of the top guys. Now, there have been people that have brought out theories. Like if you ask these like really super in-depth Star Wars fans, they'll bring up people that, okay, you know, Darth whatever could have beat him. And, you know, there's maybe 3 or 4 people that they say could have beat him.
Yeah. But
these guys that are, you know, obscure references or something.
But see, the thing about Palpatine, though, or the dark side, I should say, but this, of course, applies to Palpatine, is that, like, the dark side is the shortcut to power.
Right.
So you're taking, if you take the standpoint of, he has a master who's accumulated all these years of knowledge of the dark side. He's naturally talented himself. Then you're on a side that's a shortcut to all this power. That's how he was able to amass it so quickly. It's because he was already talented. You got a master who has all this information and knowledge. And then the whole form in which you're actually studying is like the Cliff Notes version of the Force, where the Jedi, it takes you like you got to go through trials and take tests and all this stuff. And it's like, okay.
Well, and he just basically became a total conduit for power.
Exactly.
And you bring up another great point. Let's not discount his master. His master is
Plagueis is one of the legendary Sith Lords.
Absolutely. And of course, Palpatine surpasses him, gets all of his knowledge.
And kills him.
Kills him, carries on. And so I think that, and of course, the more dark side stuff that you're doing, the more powerful you're getting into it, the more corrupt.
Yeah.
Now, it's really interesting, though, that, again, nobody is realizing this. And I really wish I can remember some of the Sith Lords that they said could beat him.
Probably Bane.
Well, Bane, he may have been one, but there's like these guys that, you know, only the super fans would really know.
So Revan wasn't probably one of them.
Well, Revan actually they say could have beat him. Revan was one of them that they said could have probably beat him, and that's because
he knew light and dark.
Yes, he knew light and dark. He was almost an equal master of both, and there was something that he did. I'm trying to remember what it was. I remember basically playing the game, years ago when it came out, like in the early 2000s or whatever. But
you're talking about
Knights of the Old Republic, where he was basically introduced. But it was one of those things that he did something. He did some crazy, spectacular thing that's like, okay, this guy is like pretty much on the upper echelon of guys. And that's why I really thought it was cool that they referenced Revan in Rise of Skywalker, that you actually saw a statue of him and that canonized him, which now makes you wonder, are they going to bring more of this stuff? And this is why I say they could really do a cool Palpatine movie. Like I said, they do need to do an origin story, but they could even do a trilogy.
They could do a trilogy, and maybe that's one of the ones that they're working on. But honestly, I would love to see this. For Palpatine, to me, I feel like that's a series. I think you really need to really get into him, man, because like you said, we don't know.
No, that's a very good point, actually.
We don't know what drives him, and that's the thing. It's like
that would be a great series.
Yeah, and everything is just like everybody we've known from Vader to Dooku. Well, we don't know. Well, Dooku, yeah, we do. Maul was pretty much kind of created as a weapon of destruction anyway. So everybody, we kind of know what was their driving force,
right,
as to what made them who they were. But like Palpatine, arguably the greatest Sith Lord that we've ever known, we don't know what drives him aside from just power.
Yeah, that's it. Unlimited power. Maybe that was his
he's
mission statement or something that he just decided to blurt out while he was toasting mace. I don't know.
He's kind of like the Michael Myers, honestly. Like you try to figure him out, like you don't know.
That's what makes me so interested in this guy.
Yeah,
it's like, what drives him? Why is he doing what he's doing? Other than the obvious, when did he come up with all this? Why did he decide to do it?
I'm like, how long did it take for him to come up with this whole master plan? And it's like when you watch the Clone, and that's why I tell everybody, if you have not watched the Clone Wars, please, I beg of you, watch the Clone Wars, like all of it, because
wrong way. There you go. Got to point to you. What he said.
Because it gives you so much background on so many different things. And the things that we're talking about, like when they couldn't feel the force around him, that's in the Clone Wars. Like when you see him go after Maul and Savage, that's in the Clone Wars. So you're seeing all this.
Yeah, it's such a great scene.
Yeah. It's the fact that when he walked in, like this from the time his ship landed, he's choking people out left and right. The guards are walking up. He's slamming up against the wall.
He's the guy that, especially during the Clone Wars era, if you've seen him use the Force, you're dead.
Yeah.
It's like, because he can't afford to let that get out.
And that's another thing, too. It's like he's just merciless, dude. Like he has no sympathy for anybody. And what's really kind of mind-boggling to me is that, like, okay, he will send Dooku to, like, okay, the Jedi cannot win, they can't get control of this particular planet, or they can't find out what this droid factory is or whatnot. And the Jedi will win. But he still doesn't. He always has like that plan B, like, okay, it's of no consequence. I have something else planned. And it's like,
I know.
How do you
this
have
guy is like the king of contingency plans.
Like, this guy
he's just got, that failed. All right, let's go to plan B, C,
and his plan
D,
still works.
It works. And it works as part of the bigger picture.
That's what I'm saying. Like
as if it were the plan all along. And it's
genius. That's what I'm saying. Like Palpatine is a pure
but if
genius.
You think about it, you would almost have to have something like this, because if you think about what his ultimate goals were, which is essentially to rule the galaxy, you have to basically be flexible and have your plan have a sense of fluidity to it.
Exactly.
In order for it to work, because you can't count on a lot of the variables,
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like the fact that this man started a war. Like he started the war.
He started the war. He played both sides of the war.
Yeah. So, from the Phantom Menace, like he really started this whole thing with, okay, he puts on this cloak, he's like Sidious, and he goes and deals with the Separatists and Dooku and that whole thing. And then he's as a senator for the Republic. He's like, well, we need to create an army but then in the back of his mind is because it's going to become my army once I get to where I need to get to.
Yeah, he basically.
And then he's just.
If you think about it, that's a good point. If you think about it, the people he was destroying built him an army.
Yeah.
He destroys the Jedi, the Republic. They're the ones that actually built him this army.
He ended up basically ruling and enslaving them because they built.
With an army they built. For pretty much him.
And then they used like Master Cypher D. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, all of this whole.
Well, besides that, you flash forward a little bit, right? They end up he ends up pretty much making the rest of the galaxy think that the Jedi were the bad guys. Mm-hmm. They created this army to take over. They're craving power. Mm-hmm. And they're these scary guys that are, every one of them, they're using this mystical power, and
mm-hmm.
I'm going to protect you from this. And
right.
I mean, he was brilliant at actually making them think that the good guys were the bad guys.
Yep.
And honestly, that's what some of the best.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look back on somebody like Hitler.
Yeah.
He was probably the most strategically sound of all the mad dictators that we've had over the years. Mm-hmm. I mean, people do point to Alexander the Great and things like that. And everybody basically had
a formula.
I mean, look, they were successful at what they did, at least for a while. But Hitler was the one that, he got the whole country to get behind him because he basically vilified the people mm-hmm. that were a threat to him. And he pretty much fixed a lot of their problems, and he made everybody think like, hey, I'm the guy that's coming to, make everything better. And if you only looked at it on the surface, it was.
Yeah.
The economy was booming, everything was cool. So they all thought he was a hero for a while.
Yep.
And that's kind of what Palpatine did. Palpatine basically looked like the good guy. Mm-hmm. When he basically was frying Mace and then let the lightning go back on himself, he turned that around on him.
Yep.
Oh, look at what they did to me when I tried to stop him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that whole thing, like,
man, yeah.
Oh, so it's treason then. Okay, let me stop the recording now while I off you guys.
Yep.
And pretty much like, try to like get one of your guys over on my side and all this. And okay, now we'll start the recording again. Oh, don't hurt, that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's a pretty cool thing that he did. And that's where I think that people, they focus too much on his Sith powers.
Yeah, the Force abilities and that you could see.
Right, and I think that what people do is they don't look at the things in totality. So in other words, yes, you had his raw talent. One of the things that made him, just to kind of encapsulate this and,
mm-hmm.
and wrap up this discussion. So his raw talent was the first thing.
All right.
Like you said in the beginning of this thing, he basically was pretty powerful from the get-go. He was kind of like the dark side version of Anakin. Mm-hmm. The second thing was he had a really good master. He had somebody that could take that raw talent and actually shape it into something that was just a devastating weapon mm-hmm. that, of course, ended up being used against him.
Which he wanted anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing about the whole Sith code that I don't understand that.
I'm cool with everything until you get to that part. It's like, wait, whoa.
Yeah, time. Wait a second. But, I mean, again, you can understand what they're saying, I hate to be cliched, from a certain point of view, because if you think about it, their whole thing is, if my apprentice can defeat me, then I don't deserve it. I don't deserve the power, and I don't deserve to live. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I guess I can get behind that a little bit.
Yeah,
but
the philosophy or ideology, is sound. It makes sense.
Yeah, I just don't know if I
just don't agree with it.
It would, and also, I mean, if I were like a Sith Lord, right, and I'm going to take on an apprentice or whatever, I'm going to probably make sure that he's a couple levels below me. Like I'm not going to. Yeah.
They took me like 80 and I'm always dead anyway. Like, I don't care.
Right. Then it becomes like a euthanasia kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? It's time to go. But that's the only thing that I can't hang with. But I mean, he had this great master. And then somehow it makes me wonder where he actually developed all this political prowess. Did it come from Plagueis? maybe some of it, but it just seemed like, or was it a natural ability?
I mean, I think it's something that he probably just studied. I think he,
like a means to an end.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is that when you have a plan of something, like, okay, this is it's no different than your life. Like, okay, I want to be an attorney, when I grow up. So,
well, then you go out and be the best attorney you can be.
Thank you. So, I think that's when you're young, you start watching, Matlock, and you start watching all these classic like lawyer or procedural shows and seeing how courtrooms are things that are being done, and
then you graduate to A Few Good Men,
and
The Firm, maybe.
Yep. And you start watching these shows, and then you're like, okay, now you're reading books, and then now you're starting to learn how to maneuver. And then, of course, you shadow people, and hey, can you teach me this or how to? And then eventually, you get good enough, and like you said, with natural raw talent, if you're able to adapt and to grab information quickly, yeah, you ascend very, very, very swiftly. And then, like I said, when you have this whole power, because that's the other thing too, just like the light side, they have the ability to manipulate too. So I'm sure he's used the dark side to manipulate people in the past. So,
well, and that's it. I mean, and wherever he actually developed this political prowess, no doubt that played into.
Oh yeah.
And so when you actually look at all this stuff in totality, that's really what makes him so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not just the raw force powers that he has. It's not just the fact that he can.
Too.
Yeah, it's when you factor everything in, his political power, his strategic mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was basically the perfect storm of Sith Lords.
Yeah, you almost can't get a better villain than that. Almost
right. It takes pretty much what ends up being a Skywalker. To defeat him, you got to have somebody that, and that's the thing. The Force actually had to conceive somebody to beat this guy.
Yeah.
Think about that,
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, and then you also had the whole fact that the dark side was rising above the light. So it's like, now he's really feeling it like, okay, I'm untouchable.
Yeah. I mean, he was definitely almost getting drunk off of his own power at that point.
He's getting drunk off his own
and
sauce.
And here's the thing, and it's a good point too. A lot of good points today. Pretty much what's happening is when Yoda actually starts to swing the pendulum the other way, and now he's blocking the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
Never even occurs to Palpatine that could be happening.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that kind of people kind of brought up too about Yoda. Even the way that Yoda died, they said that Yoda probably could have lived to be 1,000 years old. The reason why he died early was because of the guilt that he harbored for so long.
Yeah, I've heard some of these. There's that one. The other one was just the amount of strength that it took, to keep clouding the dark side and everything, and more or less going up against Palpatine's power. It's like it just tuckered the old man out, basically, and training Luke and everything. But either way, still, I think it's really funny because it never occurs to Palpatine. I mean, remember the conversation where Vader's like, no, he's on the moon or whatever, and Vader's like, or Palpatine's like, well, it's strange, I haven't felt that.
Right.
Are you sure? Are your feelings clear?
Yeah.
It never even occurs to him that he could be wrong.
Well, yeah, because it's like, once again, the same thing he accused the Jedi of, he was now being victim of, and that was his overconfidence. Because if
Luke pointed out.
I was about to say, Luke pointed it out in Return of the Jedi. He's like, your overconfidence and your weakness and your faith in your friends is yours.
Yeah, I know. It was almost like,
your mom is a
right. Like the your mama jokes are coming out at any minute. It's like some sort of like 8 Mile's gonna like they're gonna start doing rap battles and stuff, But I mean, that's it though.
Yeah.
It never. And the thing that's funny about that is you think that Palpatine would have been like, well, wait a second. Okay, that's his son. Maybe there's like that connection there. Like, look, Vader's going to feel this in the Force just because it's a family connection.
Right.
But it still never occurs to Palpatine.
And I think that's what Palpatine figured it would be, because he's got to figure like, okay, Yoda's got to be dead, because just by sheer age, he
that's true, because if you remember, everybody attributed everything to Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan has taught you well. Obi-Wan's failure is complete. Obi-Wan this, Obi-Wan that. Everybody assumed That somehow
Vader
Obi-Wan in that like 3 days that he knew him.
Well, that's the thing. Vader didn't know how long he had Luke, and that's the thing. It's like,
oh yeah, that's true.
Vader never knew how long. That's why he was like, okay, Obi-Wan can no longer help him. So he's like, okay.
Right, and I forgot about that line too. See, that's another one. Everybody's attributing everything to Obi-Wan. Yep. They have no idea. Now, there was that deleted scene, though, from Return of the Jedi that I don't remember if they ended up actually shooting it or not, but I remember Lucas was talking about it, how the original ending was supposed to be the Force Ghosts of Yoda and Obi-Wan come out and face the Emperor or something. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there he would realize it. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think the novelization had some reference to Yoda in it by Palpatine.
Yeah, but they were Force Ghosts at that point, so it still would have been like...
Yeah, I don't know if they actually thought that they were alive. Maybe they, figured, okay. Mm-hmm. But again, it's also... You also got to wonder, how much did Palpatine really know about the whole Force Ghost thing?
Well, I don't think he really knew, because honestly, the only one at that time was Qui-Gon, who was not even on Palpatine's radar, really, because after he saw him being burned alive... Well,
there was Obi-Wan, though.
Not burned alive, but burned.
Yeah.
Cremated, I should say. He thought
you would think that would be it.
That would be the end of it. And so then he just moved on with the rest of his plan. The next person who turned into a Force Ghost was Obi-Wan. Mm-hmm. Okay, so once again, with Obi-Wan popping up, and like you said, with Yoda still clouding the dark side, he probably didn't even sense that.
Well, it makes me wonder, too, like how they're going to handle the whole Obi-Wan series, because there's rumors keep piling up that there's going to be Anakin Skywalker appearances.
Well, it's probably going to be flashbacks or dreams.
It could be, but then it could also be, that he might pop up somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not seeing how, unless it's a flashback, honestly.
It could be. Well, it would almost have to be. Otherwise, it would be Vader.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, it would have to be, because at this point, it's taking place after the events of Revenge of the Sith.
Yep. So, and before Episode 4.
Right.
See, I can understand it if maybe Obi-Wan was popping up as a Force Ghost on Vader. That would actually be kind of funny.
Yeah, that would be hilarious.
I would actually go along with seeing something like that.
Scare the crap out of him.
Yeah. Well, the funniest thing was that robot chicken thing where Jar Jar kept bothering him endlessly.
And you came back as a Force Ghost?
Yeah. That was great. But, so... Again, to really wrap it up this time, I think that's all those things in totality are really what makes Palpatine so powerful, and in a lot of ways, even more powerful than most of the Sith Lords.
Yeah, definitely.
The question is, what do you guys think? Do you think that there was something else about Palpatine that makes him more powerful? Do you guys know of any other Sith Lords that could beat him? Make sure you either chat in live, or, more importantly, if you're watching this on the rebroadcast, leave it in the comment section. We would love to hear from you while you're liking our video and subscribing to our channel. All right, so I think we're going to move on now and do a little battle, huh?
All right.
All right, what do we got?
Next, we have Duel of the Fates.
All right, what do we got on Duel of the Fates today?
All right, so this week we have original trilogy versus sequel trilogy.
I love it when we pit trilogies.
Which trilogy had the better duels?
No, you're going to put me on the spot again.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but I'm ready for this one. I'm actually ready for this one.
Okay.
I cheated a little, and I put a little thought into it while I was typing up these outlines that you so brilliantly came up with. I think I'm going to go, surprisingly, with the original trilogy.
Okay.
And there's the biggest reason for that is because even though they lacked a lot of the flash of the sequel trilogy, because see, I think we may have even done this once before. We may have. I don't know. We've done a lot of shows at this point, everybody. We may have done a prequel versus original at one point. I think. Maybe. I don't know. Even if it wasn't an official topic, I think we discussed it at one point. So, obviously, a lot of people, if you pitted that up, would say the prequel trilogy, because that was by far the flashiest, coolest. I remember I was actually watching, and I referenced this on last week's show. In fact, I had just, before coming in to do the show, I was watching this Mark Hamill interview with the Russo brothers. They're doing like this whole YouTube thing now, and they're the guys that are writing all the Marvel movies and stuff. And they do this like filmmaking kind of podcast that they do on YouTube, very similar to what we do, except it's not live. And Mark Hamill was like, and this is like the funniest story too. Mark Hamill was like, yeah, George kept telling us, oh, these things are really heavy, like these big, like
almost
broadswords and all this. And he was like, and then I go and I watch the prequels, and they're like jumping around and twirling them in their hands and, all this stuff. And it's like, well, that's what we wanted to do, but it's like he was telling us, no, they're too heavy. So it was like, he couldn't do it. And it's just funny how George actually modified all that over time. So now you fast forward to the sequel trilogy. And I'm still, even though the sequel trilogy, actually, the duels aren't quite as flashy as the prequels. A little bit, but I would actually say the sequel trilogy duels, and you could tell me if you agree with this or not. I think the sequel trilogy duels are like a combination of the prequel and the original trilogy. They have a little bit of flash, but they have a little bit of the style of the original trilogy duels.
I think they're more like closer to the original trilogy, honestly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. Well, I'll just say this. I agree with you that I prefer the original trilogy duels over the sequels, actually.
Well, and I never said why. So before you go into your thing.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to let you go, definitely.
All right, Kanye, I'm going to let you finish. But no, I mean, the reason why is because I think there was more emotional weight to those duels. That's the reason why I favor the original trilogy duels. Because if you think about it, if you look at each one of the duels, right, there's the first one we're ever introduced to, because A New Hope was the first movie to come out, is the Obi-Wan Vader. Now, we all know that I really love that one that person came up with that's been floating around YouTube for a while, where I think it's called like Darth Vader Obi-Wan Duel Reimagined or something, or remastered or whatever. And I mean, it's spectacular.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, George, if you're going to make yet another umpteenth special edition or whatever, could you put that in there? Because that's just awesome. And by making it flashier, it does not violate my original statement, because it's the old master basically going up against his student who's turned evil, and there's a lot at stake there.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things, outside of maybe the duels in Revenge of the Sith, I think that there's just more at stake. The stakes are higher in the original trilogy. And I think that's true even if you compare it to the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the biggest things that we talked about as far as the Rise of Skywalker was there wasn't any sense of danger, almost, or it wasn't a sense of like we got like angst or we have to get this done, or
there was no real urgency. Thing. I mean,
it was no sense of urgency.
Kind of like, especially the Rise of Skywalker was like, they would basically go through and they would face an obstacle and they would resolve it in like 2 minutes. There was nothing, there was no real high stakes to it. There was no sense of danger. There was no point in any part of that movie that you had doubt that the heroes might fail.
Right.
And I think the best stories come from when you're struggling along with the people that you're seeing on the screen. And things aren't wrapped up so neatly.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, I love The Rise of Skywalker, don't get me wrong, and I love a lot of the duels in it too, but they just didn't have the same weight. They didn't have the same meaning to me. Yeah,
it didn't. I think the biggest thing too with the Rise of Skywalker, I mean, not the Rise of Skywalker, the sequel trilogy, there was only one that was really kind of like, okay, they're really about to get down, and that was in The Last Jedi with Kylo and Rey when they were going against the Praetorian Guards. But once again, they were going against Praetorian, like they didn't have lightsabers. They had these weird other weapons. And it was kind of cool, but it was just kind of like, No. Like, that's kind of, I mean, that was cool, but it's like, it's not what I really wanted. Like, I want, like, if you would have gave me a Kylo and Rey fight like that, I mean, and that was kind of cool, but even the way they shot it was kind of, like, they did some kind of tricks, like they would throw a lightsaber and, catch it and,
I mean,
impale somebody. Like, that
it's
was
funny
cool,
because
but
as reviled as The Last Jedi is, it probably had the best lightsaber duel of the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
With that whole Rey and Kylo against the Praetorian Guards.
Yeah, and then, honestly, the best fight was basically with Rey and Luke with a stick, honestly. I mean, that was, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I really don't think that they may, and I get it. Dave Filoni said this in that gallery thing that we watched, and it's it's all about the story and everything that kind of goes around it, the TIE fighters, the lightsaber duels, and all that stuff. That just adds to the story, but at the core of it all, it's the story. But the thing I loved about George Lucas, what he did with the prequels, was that there was still a great story, but the lightsaber duels like enhanced it massively. The problem with the sequel trilogy is that it was almost too raw. Like, there was no technique with their fighting.
Yeah.
It was almost like seeing two kids just swinging sticks at each other, where, okay, with
but then again, some people actually like that aspect of it. Because if you think about it, other than Kylo Ren, who would really be experienced? I mean, Rey, then again, she could do everything else, and she was trained, actually, that would have been the most realistic part, is that she was trained with her staff, so she should have been able to, fight a little bit better, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Than, what we had seen. But then again, I thought that was actually on par. I mean, you're not going to expect her to fight like the prequel trilogy people, because those were Jedis that had been training with lightsabers from the time, and they also used the Force to enhance their moves and everything else.
Yeah, I wanted to at least be on a par with the original trilogy, because like you saw the growth in Luke. Like, okay, I remember, watching Empire and just seeing Luke use the Force to pull the lightsaber out of the snow. I was just like, whoa, okay. Like, you didn't know how powerful he was yet. When he finally went up against Vader, he was confident. He wasn't skilled, skilled. But you can see there was a vast difference. Just the way that how Vader was masterful with it, as far as, okay, he's basically fighting him with one hand. And he's shoving Luke back, and, he's taunting him in a way. But Luke is still giving it his all, but he's still showing some skill, though. Like, that's why even Vader had to comment, it's like, impressive. And he's just kind of like...
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be the first person, okay, right out the gate, that was Luke's first duel. And he was like a Jedi master compared to the sequel trilogy duels. But again, I think that there was more weight to that. And don't forget that even though I know it wasn't extensive, Luke still had Yoda and Obi-Wan. And Luke was basically on Dagobah for, I think they said, like a few weeks or something. So it's not like we saw everything in the movie.
True. Just looking at like how Vader came so strongly after Luke, that third time on Endor, not Endor, Bespin, when they were on that bridge, and Vader was just really like pound, like the fact that Luke was like going blow to blow with him, and he even hit Vader on the shoulder and everything, and like I was just like, okay,
I mean, he
like,
obviously, and that's what I'm saying, he obviously had some training.
And I'm like, all right, Luke, and eventually he lopped his hand off. But, but it's like, okay, it gave you hope for a moment that he might actually be able to stand up against Vader at this point.
And that was the first time, and this is why I say you got to keep going back to the first time you're seeing these. This is the first time that you see Vader actually getting wounded or in any kind of danger at all, And this goes back to what I mean by the weight of everything. There was emotional weight behind the duels.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving into now the second great lightsaber duel. That's the Luke and Vader one. Okay, now it's this, blossoming Jedi who's going up against now this evil
Sith
Lord who's pretty much like the obstacle standing in the way. It's almost like the knight slaying the dragon kind of a story. You know, you're getting that theme in there. And again, there's weight to it. There's weight behind why they're dueling. It's not just pretty much like an exhibition.
Right.
You know, or a drill thing or something. I mean, it's actually, there's meaning behind this. There's weight behind this. You don't necessarily get that in the sequel trilogy. In fact, you know what the most emotionally, this is going to crack you up. You know what I think the most emotionally impactful duel is? Is Finn versus that traitor.
Oh.
Because you basically had a thing to where those guys had a relationship at one point.
Yeah.
And now they're on opposite sides. And the stormtrooper that basically called him a traitor feels quite betrayed by Finn. Finn now feels like, hey, you're working for a really bad organization here. And now they're fighting. There's emotion behind that. And I think that that's something that's missing from a lot of the duels in the sequel trilogy.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, I think that's a very valid point because, I mean, you saw emotion from Rey a lot of times, but it was just kind of like you really, I mean, you would think you would get a lot of emotion because of how Rey was, and then of course from Kylo being unstable as he was anyway. You would think, but even when it came to the duels, it was kind of like swipe, swipe, swipe. Let me tell you a story. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Listen, you know, swipe, swipe. You know, and it was just kind of like, oh my God, like. So of course, you know, when we were looking at the trailers for Rise of Skywalker, you know, they're fighting on the old Death Star, and you know, it's like, okay, all the water's falling off and Kylo's drenching and the lightsabers coming through the water, and you're like, oh yeah, this is about to be like the battle.
Well, and I will say that's so the sequel trilogy has like some cool environments for the battles.
The environments were dope.
You know, first they had that foresty kind of thing in The Force Awakens.
Yep.
You know, then they have the throne room in the Last Jedi where it's just a no holds barred.
Yeah, everybody's
just explosion. Everybody's, you know,
going for
just
it.
going crazy. It's like the octagon in there.
Yep.
And then you flash forward to the whole Rise of Skywalker thing, and now you've got, they're on this, you know, old wreckage of this thing, and they're going at it with all this water going, and you know, then of course, what are the other battles that they had in there? I mean, they had some, of course, in Palpatine's throne room, which was crazy on Exegol, and did they do anything before that?
And see, to me, like, the best one was kind of like watching Kylo dismantle, like, the Knights of Ren.
Yeah, but again, see, this goes back to the point I was making.
The
There's emotion behind that.
Yeah, exactly, but that's what I'm saying. But
the closest you got to Rey and Kylo having emotion was when she was really fighting for him to be basically good. And you could sort of see that in The Last Jedi, but it wasn't really, because first they were fighting together and she thought, oh, he's on my side now. It was after the battle that the emotional weight came in.
Right.
Not during, which is what I would say, if you're going to have something really cool, there's got to be a reason for the fight.
And that's why the best, honestly, out of the sequel trilogy, and I can't even really say it was really a duel, but that gives you the duel vibe, that gives you the emotional content that you're talking about, was between Kylo and Luke.
Yeah.
Because once again, you have that weight of master versus student, opposite sides. You know, I don't agree with you. You know, you don't agree with me. There's this weight. I'm trying to save what's left of the 12 people that's left in the resistance.
Exactly. Before I get the entire resistance out on the Falcon.
Exactly. You know, and it's like, okay, you got all these gunships, you got these AT-ATs out here, you know, okay, I got to hold you off. And, you know, that was just like, okay, a moment, like, okay, this is the standoff. And of course, everybody's like, oh, it's Luke. He's back. He's going to kick some butt. It's not really Luke, but, you know, so, I mean, that whole moment had that.
He's there in spirit.
Oh.
Sorry, I had to say it.
But Yeah, that had the emotional content. That had the that build up. That's like, okay, you kind of knew Luke had to do something. And then you got it and it's like, okay, cool. But outside of that, I mean, there, like I said,
and maybe you could give a little bit of weight to the Phasma Finn fight. Because it's a very similar vibe to the stormtrooper that went up against him in The Force Awakens, is that you have, once again, Phasma obviously had somewhat of a soft spot for Finn. You could sort of tell the way she was dealing with him. And I think, actually, they even went into some detail about that. One of the things that I wish I had done, and I could still do it at some point, is read the Phasma novel. Now, that, of course, goes into a lot of her backstory and everything, but it does make her a more sympathetic character from what I've understood. A lot of people that have reviewed it and everything have said that. But, again, emotional weight.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that I think are important if you're going to present us with these duels. And, again, I think that that's one of the things that makes Star Wars Star Wars. You can't just rewrite it scene for scene. Because one of the things that George Lucas brought into Star Wars is the heart of it.
Yeah.
And the familiar themes that are basically storytelling 101.
Yeah.
The hero's journey, the knight slays a dragon, good versus evil. A lot of these themes that are timeless that are brought into it, whereas sometimes I think one of the downsides of the sequel trilogy is they try to replicate the original trilogy, but there's no heart. It's just a carbon copy, but it doesn't have the soul.
I was going to say it's a shell with no soul.
Right, and that's the part that I have it. I mean, I love the sequel trilogy. And I mean, you and I have talked about it. We reviewed, I don't think we ever reviewed The Force Awakens because that came out before
we started the podcast.
Yeah, and we never did a retroactive review of it. But it would be interesting, actually, to go back one day just for the completionist. One of the coworkers that I have, she was talking about, I should watch your guys' podcast or whatever, because she had just, I don't remember if she just saw all of them or what, but she had just watched the sequel trilogy, and she loved it, man. She thought they were amazing movies and and everything, and we were talking about how bad the prequels were, and, I pointed out that they were actually good stories, but they were poorly written, and how Lucas and, she was talking about the whole thing, absolutely. And then I was like, I actually did on the podcast. We reviewed The Last Jedi and even The Rise of Skywalker. She's like, oh, really? I got to check that out. And then it just dawned on me. I'm like, we never really reviewed The Force Awakens, though.
No, we did.
So we should probably do that in retrospect. And actually, one of the things we should probably do is just go back and review them all. Every Star Wars movie. So we actually have reviews on record that people can go back and listen to or watch, in this case. So when we do that, maybe we could do that as a separate live show or something where we do these reviews or whatever. And
yeah, that'd be cool.
And do that. Yeah, that might be cool. Or maybe we can make it a main topic of one of our shows where we go, okay, for the next 9 weeks or 6 or 7. But yeah, I think that would be cool because that's one of the problems that I think exists with the sequel trilogy is the fact that it's a replication of what Star Wars is, but it's not the heart of what Star Wars is.
Yeah.
Even though they're really good movies and they're visually stunning, they're just missing that aspect of the original trilogy.
Yeah. It's kind of like, you're trying to find that love in a new girlfriend that looks like the old girlfriend.
Right. But she just isn't the same.
She's just not the same.
She looks as good, or maybe she looks like the other one, but she's just not.
She just doesn't have it.
She just doesn't have it, yeah, and that's the thing. I think a lot of times, and people understand that with relationships.
Yeah,
they understand that. They even understand that with music or movies in general. But again, it's when you start talking about Star Wars that everybody just goes off the rails or something. It's like people hold Star Wars to a much higher standard, and if you're going to slap that Star Wars name on it,
you better bring it.
You better be able to bring it.
Yep.
And I think that it's funny that even some of the better filmmakers that are out there, they're taking a stab at Star Wars, and it's just not happening.
Yeah, because I think you really, and I think you brought up a good point, is that Star Wars came from the mind of one guy.
Yeah.
He has the whole thing in his head. And because you really would have to get into Lucas's head, which is why I think that Dave Filoni is so successful, because he's done that.
Well, I think that he is definitely the heir apparent to Lucas. I think that he should be the one. I actually brought this. I think that was
we brought this up.
We brought this up a million times, but I think you actually, I was gonna say, stuck me with it on my own last week. You came up with like this really cool outline for me by myself, which was great. I appreciate that, by the way. But then you gave me all these like discussions. I mean, thank goodness everybody was chatting like crazy, because, I mean, that's what saved me on that one. But basically, it came from the mind of one person, and Filoni is that natural extension because Lucas trained him so well.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that he would be the one that would make sense, maybe not to run Lucasfilm, but to at least control the whole storytelling aspect of Star Wars, and pretty much everything has to go through him, because he gets it.
Yeah, he definitely gets it.
He gets it, and I think that if you start getting a bunch of directors and writers that also got it, you would probably get better stories. You would get a better movie. Not to take anything away from the sequel trilogy, because I personally think each one of those movies has merit at the very least, but I think they're great in their own way. But again, and I told this to my coworker too, we do see the problems. We see the mistakes. We see some of the misses, things that they could have done that would have been better, things that they could have done that maybe wouldn't have caused such toxicity in the fan base.
Right.
So I don't know, but overall, I know that we're probably on the same page here, but I'm going to say the original trilogy, just to recap, has the best duels, mostly because, even though, and they were visually stunning too, I think a lot of times the original trilogy gets a bad rap because of the prequel trilogy, and they're not doing somersaults and spinning their lightsabers all over the place. I think that they were actually really cool for their time, but I mean, I think they still hold up.
Yeah, like I said, I think they still hold up because, like you said, the emotional weight and
that's it.
And the way that they were choreographed to show that. Like they were choreographed in a way to show, okay, Luke is comparable, but he's not there yet, and you have to show that with a fighting style, and that's kind of difficult. Because you have to kind of show that with it being entertaining, creating that angst or that urgency, but at the same time showcasing a skill set too, all at the same time. And that's basically when you're choreographing a fight scene, sometimes that's pretty much what you have to do. You have to think about, how does this come across to everybody? Like, do you feel what I want you to feel? And that's one of the things, like, even when you talk about comedians, like, I was watching something about Tracy Morgan. Howard Stern had asked Tracy Morgan, who's the best stand-up comedian. And of course he said Richard Pryor, but he's like, arguably he's probably like the best, but you can't forget about like Charlie Chaplin, because it's like, he did it with no sound. Like, he was funny with no sound. Like, how are you funny with no? So that means everything that you do has to be physical, and you have to just emote that. And
you're conveying it.
You're conveying that. Yeah, and to do that like I said, in the fight scene, you have to create angst. You have to create that sense of urgency. You have to show a skill set. Like, okay, he's here, they're there, and then you still have to create an emotion behind it. And that went with like the lighting. That's why I like that whole scene was like, the force is strong with you, young Skywalker.
Oh,
but you're
man,
not a Jedi
the
yet.
lighting was
the lighting in
intense.
that, I mean, just like, it just created
and it
that.
Did, and that's
and
the
then
thing.
he's on this pedestal, Lucas down. I mean,
It
sold it.
There were so many things in that scene that sold it, and there were so many things being said to you
without a word.
Exactly. Man. It just enhanced everything, and these are the kinds of moments that are absent from the sequel trilogy.
Exactly.
It didn't have that much thought put into it. Some of the things were, wouldn't it be cool if we had a lightsaber duel in this environment and that environment? And it became very video game-ish at that point.
That's a very good analogy. A very, very good analogy.
And that's it. And again, exactly, it's not to take anything away from it, but at the same time, it just does not have the emotional weight that the original trilogy has. And like you said, even the way they were fighting, there was reasoning and there was emotion behind it and there was logic behind it.
Like, I didn't see any growth in Rey's lightsaber skills at
Exactly.
all. I didn't see any growth at all, or Kylo's. They both were erratic as ever. Like, some kids doing this. Like, that's like, okay, what the heck is that? Like, especially Kylo, because I'm like, okay, well, you've had training under Luke. Like, Snoke is probably...
I can almost let that go. Not to be a Kylo apologist. I mean, I have said millions of times that he's probably one of, if not my favorite character of the sequel trilogy, so I do tend to defend him for that reason, but not to go into that realm, but I do think it fits his character, though, because he's so unhinged that it makes sense for his fighting style to be erratic, because obviously he's skilled. He's the only lightsaber duelist in the whole sequel trilogy, other than Luke, where it's obvious he has some kind of training going on. And that may have been by design.
Well, I mean, this is what I loved. Like, I think this is like one of my favorite lines. Was it? Yeah, it was in The Last Jedi. And Snoke basically was like chastising Kylo. He was like, you got beat by a girl who's never even held a lightsaber before. Like, how are you? And I was just like, thank you. Thank you. I mean, granted, I get it. The fact that he did take that blaster bolt from Chewbacca.
From a bowcaster, no less. That's not a laughing matter.
And he was able to sustain his life, basically, and still fight. So, I mean, kudos to
actually,
Kylo
if you
on
think
that,
about it, though, that whole scene was funny because he's going off on how you think you're Vader with your little mask and
like,
all
take
this.
that stupid thing.
You know, it's just like...
Yeah, and then he shoots the lightning through the floor, and then, I mean, that was cool. I was like, all right.
That was pretty cool.
That was Palpatine-ish. So when you find out that, like, Palpatine created this, and I was like, well, no wonder, because that was definitely Palpatine
and the other
move.
thing that was cool, too, is when he basically, like, suspended Hux in midair and just slammed him on the floor. I mean,
or with Rey, when he was just like, the lightsaber and chucked it and hit her in the head with it. And
yeah, when she, like, grabbed it. And then, I mean, there was actually, I will say this, the sequel trilogy now, if you want to say which trilogy had the best Force showcase,
oh, yeah.
hands down, the sequel.
Yeah.
I would say even more so than the prequels, which would be really surprising.
Yeah.
But it's because if you think of just the brutality, it's the brutality of the powers.
Yeah.
All those scenes that we mentioned, I mean, everything, or even in Rise of Skywalker when, you know, it's almost like a little spin on that whole I find your lack of faith disturbing, and he's choking, and he just, like, throws the guy up into the ceiling. And I mean, everything is just so brutal. If you look at every use of the Force pretty much against somebody like that, there was such a brutality and aggression behind it.
Or even just sheer power. Like you said, Force ability. If you want to talk about the Force abilities, the sequel trilogy has it down. From Luke projecting himself across, like, the galaxy. And then even in the very beginning when, like, Kylo stops a laser bolt in midair and he holds it there, has a whole conversation with people, takes them on the ship, and then it just, I mean...
Well, and, you know, a lot of people will point to Rey using the Force lightning, but how about before that, when they're basically playing tug-of-war with a ship?
Yeah.
You know, they're holding a ship with the Force, and then they're, like, trying to, you know, like, pull it away from each other, and then, of course, she finally shoots lightning and blows the thing up. I mean, this is stuff that we haven't seen before, but again, very video game-ish.
It was.
But that was actually the video game part that I thought was cool. Because once again, one of the things that I liked about the sequel trilogy was finally they're using the Force more to its full potential.
Yeah.
You know, that they're actually like, okay, yes, this is the kind of thing you would do if you had this power.
Exactly. No, totally. I agree with that.
You know, and that's one of the problems that I honestly had with both the prequel and original. Now, original, I know he was still kind of feeling this thing out, and you know, he had a little bit of a different viewpoint, and he was going through different influences. I get all that. I understand that. But it's one of those things where there's times where they wouldn't even use the Force at all, and you're just sitting there like, you guys, you could just use Force push, or you could just do this or just do that. Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you do it in this situation and not the other situation?
Yeah.
Like, that makes no sense to me. But in the sequel trilogy, they pretty much did. You know, another honorable mention It's so funny. I try to wrap this segment up twice, and I keep going with it. But another honorable mention, as far as duels that have emotion, even though we keep mentioning all these, we're saying there's none in the sequel trilogy, but then we keep bringing these up. But that's because they're only these little bite-sized nuggets. They're not really truly like the whole weight of it. It's almost like there's a little bit of the weight. Yeah, like a little splash here and there. But it's when Luke attempted to kill Kylo. And he had to, it was a flashback scene, but I mean, it was in there, so.
Right.
Again.
Actually, the best duel was probably between Luke and Leia in that little flashback.
Yeah, you know what? It really made me want to see a lot more of that.
Oh, man, definitely.
Like, now I want them to go back to, like, a post-Return of the Jedi thing and kind of show that whole thing.
Honestly, like I said, I really would love to see that as an animated series.
That would be cool. That would actually be cool.
Yeah.
Because then they can get somebody, like whoever played her in Rebels or whatever, they could just get somebody to voice Leia.
Her, yep.
And that would be cool. What do you think of this whole Lucas cut thing? I mean, it applies. I've been dying to bring this up. So I had to try to shoehorn it somewhere into a segment where it made some sense.
The Lucas cut.
Well, first of all, do you think it actually exists?
It's possible.
I say that it's likely, and here's why. Because everybody, when they brought up the stupid Snyder cut to, was it Justice League?
Yeah.
So they brought that up, and everybody said, oh, it's just a rumor. Oh, it's just this or whatever. It's like, well, now HBO Max is going to be releasing it next year. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I guess it's not just a rumor. So the idea is that Lucas did his own cut of The Rise of Skywalker, and it's like 40 minutes longer or something like that. And it actually explains a little bit more, and it's supposedly a much better cut. So I'd be curious to see that. And the reason why it relates to this is I wonder if some of the things that we thought were missing, particularly in The Rise of Skywalker, as far as some of the emotion behind things and everything, I wonder if Lucas actually really did come in and try to fix it a little bit.
See, I think that's what they should have did with all the movies. They should just give him all the Lucas and then have him make his own cut of them, just to see if how the fans would take it.
Well, the thing is, though, and this is where the hypocrisy of the fans come from. He makes the prequels, and it's like, Lucas killed my childhood. Lucas is terrible. Lucas is awful. Then the sequel trilogy comes out. Bring back Lucas. Let Lucas fix this. It's like, guys.
Well, I think.
I mean,
I think you have to use, much like Vader, you have to use Lucas the right way and sparingly. I think you have to.
Well, that's it. You got to let him oversee the story.
The story.
Not direct it, because he's terrible at directing.
Right. So let him oversee the story, and then the edit. I guess, well, no, because even the first movie was the Empire.
No, I think you're talking about A New Hope, how it was saved in the edit.
Oh, yeah.
Like the first edit was terrible. And then his wife or whatever came in and redid it, and it's like, oh, that's the Star Wars we know. Mm-hmm. And it just shows you how important editing is. Yeah, I mean,
a good woman.
Exactly. So that I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I mean, it would just be interesting to see if this thing actually exists, and it very well could. I mean, I'm still a little on the fence about it. That's why I try on the show as much as possible to have us stay away from too much rumor stuff. Mm-hmm. Or if it is a rumor, I like to be very, either in our show notes or even in the title of the thing, I'll say, like, okay, this is what's rumored be happening. Let's discuss it, because it's a fun discussion to have. But I don't want to be that guy that's, one of these people that are on the internet and YouTube and social media and all this, like, being part of the problem of spreading all this misinformation. So I like to categorize it. But I have to admit that every once in a while it is a lot of fun to actually discuss things that are rumored, because they could launch into a what-if situation.
Yeah, and some rumors are, like, more likely than others, too.
True, yeah.
There's some things
like Mace is probably not Snoke.
Yeah, I mean, that was just obvious.
But a Lucas cut of Rise of Skywalker could exist.
Yeah, that's actually plausible.
Right, and hey, look, we did do at least a pretty good, if it wasn't the title of the show, we did spend quite a bit of time on the whole Mace Windu being Snoke or not being Snoke and why. But again, I think that some of the more plausible rumors are fun to discuss because it's kind of like, okay, if it's true, what do we think about it? And what do you guys think about it? And like I said, as we're talking, like I said, you can chat in if it's working. I'm not sure if it's working. Last time that we didn't have any chats, we got all these messages afterwards, like the chat wasn't working. The chat wasn't working.
Yeah. I've seen some from some of our regulars.
Oh, great. Okay, read them out. Sorry, guys. I don't know. Last week, thank goodness the chat was working, but sometimes, I don't know, maybe there's a setting in there or whatever. We're not ignoring you. Nothing has shown up here. So go back in time, even if you guys are talking about things that we talked about like an hour ago.
Well, let's see. Ronaldo.
Hey, Ronaldo.
Hey.
I knew you'd be here. That's why I knew that something was up. I'm like, wait, Ronaldo hasn't said anything to us yet.
Yeah, so he first says hi.
Hey. Hour later.
Right. 3 hours later. There's a theory there was a Sith temple under the Jedi temple, and because of that, they couldn't see that Palpatine was a Sith.
Oh, you know what? I heard about that.
I never heard that one.
I heard that. I forgot where it came from, but I heard the whole theory of that there was a Sith temple under the Jedi temple, and it's kind of a cool theory, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's a cool one. I don't know.
I don't remember where it came from. Chat now, because Daryl's actually checking this stuff. If you guys know where that theory came from, let us know.
He said
okay.
it would tie with the Rise of Skywalker.
Sure.
Clone Wars makes Revenge of the Sith look like some Lord of the Rings stuff. Nilatu says, I have a question. Why has no one talked about the war dealer from The Last Jedi?
The war dealer?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about who's the war dealer.
Who's the war dealer?
We'll come back to that.
Well, clearly we can turn in our cards on being authorities on anything Star Wars, because I don't know. I mean, there's the code breaker.
The code breaker. Maybe I don't know if that's what that we're referring to.
Is that what you're referring to? Well, chat with us back and let us know.
I'm not trying to be an SJW or anything.
Oh boy.
Like
here we go.
But why is Rey considered a Mary Sue character while Palpatine is an overpowered male character? And this is the first time I've seen anyone ask why.
Oh, well, that's an easy one.
We just went over.
Well, I mean, we kind of did, yeah. But just to answer that question directly, though, because I mean, it seems like a good question. I know. I just. It's kind of like,
go for it, man.
Dislike. But no, because here's what you got to look at. Rey had never had any exposure to the Force at all. Like zero. Mm-hmm. No training, no nothing. She's a scavenger. She's running around on Jakku. She has no idea about anything, never had any training. Even if she has raw Force powers, I can hang with that. But, they usually come out like when Luke or Anakin, like in Anakin's case, right? Oh, he's the only human that's ever been able to do the pod race, or, he's unusually gifted, and he has like really good reflexes. He wasn't, doing Force mind tricks and all this stuff up, like, oh, let me give this a shot, and nobody's ever showed him.
Yeah, he wasn't doing like advanced.
He wasn't doing any advanced stuff that Rey, would just
instantly do.
Like I read it somewhere, and all of a sudden she could pull it off after like 2 tries or whatever. Same thing with Luke. Palpatine, on the other hand, we can trace back to around the time he was in his 20s when he was being trained as a Sith Lord.
He was actually being trained
he was being trained as a Sith Lord. Yeah. Okay, so he actually had all this training. By the time he became Darth Sidious, at least the one that we know, yeah, he had like a ton of training. That's why. All right, what's next?
Oh, the next stuff is funny.
I know. See, I knew we were missing all this great chat.
So Nilatu asks Ronaldo, is the chat not working again? If so, bummer. Ronaldo responds, I think it isn't. Nilatu says, all right, I think they need to get a phone next to them. That's what I'm saying. You just can't help but laugh at this.
Man, see, this is what I love about doing these shows. I mean, I love the chat stuff. That's why I don't understand That's so hilarious.
So then they're just basically saying their goodbyes after this. So sorry, Nilla Tube and Ronaldo.
Yeah, well,
by the time I checked this stuff or I could put it up on my computer, you guys are already gone. Yeah.
So was there anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay. All right. So I think now that we've kind of wrapped up, what we were behind on the chat, what do you say that we drown our chat sorrows with a drink and go to the cantina?
Let's go for it.
All right, let's do it. All right, so now we're in the part of our show where we like to just discuss a couple of different topics that have come up. This is where we'll discuss little news tidbits, things, or anything that we really want to discuss. So the first thing that we got is actually kind of a pretty cool, surprising news article.
Yeah, The Mandalorian is nominated for 15 Emmy nominations.
Which is amazing.
Amazing.
I mean, I was thinking maybe it would get nominated for like 3 or 4 or something.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's 15
and
is just incredible.
Also, Star Wars Resistance has gotten nominated too.
Really?
For Best Children's Program.
Well, it should, because you know what? Let me just take a second here to just get on top of my Star Wars Resistance soapbox. I've watched, now I admit, I haven't watched a lot of the second and what has ended up being the final season of the show, but I will say that even though it is obviously geared toward kids, I mean, there's no doubt in the world that this is one of the first Star Wars things totally geared toward kids. But if you actually overlook some of the more kiddish type things that it has in it, it's got a really cool plot to it. And it's got some really cool characters to it as well. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And the fact that it's up for any kind of an awards, especially an Emmy, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But what is The Mandalorian up for?
Wow. So okay, let's go through the gamut, shall we?
Why
All right.
not? That's why we're here.
Yep. So of course, outstanding drama series, The Mandalorian. Outstanding children's program, as we just mentioned, The Resistance. Outstanding voice over performance, Mandalorian Chapter 8, Redemption, Taika Waititi as IG-11. Outstanding guest actor in the drama series, Mandalorian Chapter 8, The Redemption, with Giancarlo Esposito as Moff Gideon, which is yes. Outstanding production design for a narrative program, Half Hour. The Mandalorian Chapter 1.
Half hour. That's a little bit over.
Yeah, I know, right?
Overdoing it. It's more like 20 minutes. Jeez, I think some of those early Clone Wars
12.
shorts were longer than that.
Outstanding cinematography for a single camera series, Half Hour. The Mandalorian Chapter 7, The Reckoning.
Shortest series ever.
Outstanding fantasy sci-fi costumes, The Mandalorian Chapter 3, The Sin.
It's interesting that they're specifying
The
different
episode?
chapters, yeah,
or
different
chapters.
episodes,
Whatever.
because you would think that something like that you could just say, okay, the show.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they're zeroing in on specific episodes is
Kinda
somewhat.
cool. It's really cool because now you can see, if you want to know what they're talking about specifically, this one was really.
Well, I could tell you right now, whoever did Chapter 8 and whoever did Chapter 3, they're coming back now because Disney's probably going to go, okay, these old truckload of Emmys is being, let's get those directors and storytellers back.
Exactly. Outstanding single camera picture editing for the drama series Mandalorian Chapter 2, The Child. Outstanding prosthetic makeup for a series, limited series, or movie special, Mandalorian Chapter 6, The Prisoner.
Interesting. See, now I could see that. Well, wait a minute. Was oh man, I blanked. It's Nick Nolte's character, the
Ugnaught,
what's his name?
Cruel?
No,
Is it Cruel?
this is so embarrassing.
Oh no, wait.
No, we're thinking of Creef or whatever, like Carl Weathers' character.
No, that's Grief. Yeah, Carl. Grief.
Yeah, Grief.
Grief. Something like that.
Creef. Yeah, we're
It sounds
big.
like-
We're totally.
Well, it sounds like we're trying to learn some new language.
Either that or we sound like our parents trying to like get into the thing that we're into or something
Yeah.
like that. It's like
What is that?
Unbelievable. I never thought that something like that, especially Star Wars, would happen to me. But see, again, there's like all this stuff that's being added all the time. And I'm reading so much of it.
Yeah.
And I actually have a life, so, you know.
Yeah. Some things kind of have to seep
Some
out.
things, yeah. I mean, that's it. You know, the hard drive, sometimes I got to, like, you know, purge the cache memory occasionally. And
Defrag the computer.
Yep.
Outstanding music composition for a series. Dramatic score, The Mandalorian. Chapter 8, Redemption. Which I love watching, like, how that guy created, like, the music on. If you guys haven't checked it out on Disney Plus, Star Wars The Gallery, they actually have the guy who they showed him how he actually created like the theme songs and the music for The Mandalorian, and watching him like direct and everything was really cool.
That whole gallery, so that should actually win some awards as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it really gives
like
you
best behind the scenes thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Best behind the scenes ever, you know.
Outstanding sound editing for a comedy or a drama series, half hour, and animation, Mandalorian Chapter 1. Outstanding sound mixing for a comedy or a drama series, half hour, and animation, Mandalorian Chapter 2. And outstanding visual effects, Mandalorian Chapter 2, The Child. And outstanding stunt coordination for drama series, limited series, or more movie, The Mandalorian. So the winners will be announced Sunday, September 20th, during the 72nd Emmy Award ceremony on NBC. So
it'll probably be all virtual. There'll be no audience, but yeah, right. I mean, and this is really encouraging news because once again, Star Wars is now back out there in a positive light.
Yep.
Winning a truckload of awards, kind of like in the early days of the original trilogy. And even then, it was really only the first one that was nominated for 7 Academy Awards and won. I forgot how many it actually won, but usually the stuff that Star Wars will do is like they'll give them the awards for like best editing or best sound design or like the more little technical stuff. You're never going to get a best picture or best actress or actor or anything out of them. But this is, and again, notice that none of this stuff was really for, you know, best actor in a drama series.
Right.
And it's a shame because I actually think that there's some great acting moments in The Mandalorian, like most of the episodes. But, I mean, I get it. You know, it's... Unfortunately, that's the stigma that sci-fi and fantasy movies and TV shows and stuff like that have. They very rarely nail down the awards.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is encouraging that there are so many awards being given to this, and it's going to give a little bit of credibility, I think, into the Star Wars thing, and it might further enhance the warmth that the fans are feeling for this particular series. Because if you notice, with all the hatred that goes around the various new Disney-era Star Wars stuff, The Mandalorian and Rogue One are the two movies that pretty much everybody's into.
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah.
But, I mean, do you think, like, how many of these awards do you think they'll win? That's the question.
Let's see. I think they'll probably, let me go back. I think they'll
You're
probably
like, well, I don't know.
win.
Let me talk to my bookie and see what my bet was.
Outstanding drama series. I think they might lose that one to some other thing, but I mean,
drama series.
Yeah, exactly. But I think,
well, if I'm just gonna go by numbers, I'm gonna say they're gonna snag about 7. Like, I don't know which 7 they're gonna be.
yeah, out of the 15, that sounds like a good one because, like I said, out of the like fantasy, sci-fi, the costume, cinematography.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
like
lot of really
that type
cool
of stuff.
technical awards, and they could do that. And honestly, really, what else is doing the stuff that they're doing?
But see, the other thing too, you almost have to kind of think about it from this perspective too. Like, if we're talking about television, and this is the question that I'm having because television really isn't releasing anything new because of the whole coronavirus thing.
Well, but if you think about it, when The Mandalorian came out, that wasn't, you know, anything that they're doing for the Emmys this year, the cutoff was probably like January or February at the latest of 2020. They're usually going by year.
Okay.
So this is going to be predominantly like 2019 stuff. So.
Okay. Well, because I was gonna say like, if you have like, are we including like Netflix stuff in the Emmys?
Well,
you see what
and
I'm
that's
saying?
it. Yeah, I know. And well, the Emmys is television.
And that's my point.
So it's
though.
going to be network stuff. So like Designated Survivor, stuff like that.
Exactly.
You know, that could be in the mix too. And this is why the Emmys are getting really interesting because first of all, you have because
you got people watching a lot more series on Netflix than they are.
and
this is pre-coronavirus,
right? But and then it goes to what's the line being drawn between Oscars and Emmys now? Because it used to like look. So The Irishman, which is amazing, by the way, that I think was either up for or won some Oscars. Those are Oscars because it was a movie. Then you turn around and something else on Netflix is up for an Emmy because it's a series. So it's the same format, though.
and a lot of series are shot like movies. So,
Sure.
you know,
They're basically like 10-hour movies just split up into... So it's, it gets really crazy because now all these streaming services are basically introducing their own original content.
Yeah.
Prime has its own original content.
Netflix,
Hulu, Netflix, Disney, and it's like virtually every... Then you get CBS All Access,
HBO, because you got,
Yep.
like Ballers, you got...
Sure. Showtime and
Showtime
Cinemax
takes
has
it.
done it. Then you got, Peacock Network
Yep.
has just come out. And so you have all these different streaming services now putting out their own original content. So now it's like it's got to be crazy for these people to try to decide winners because it used to be when you dealt with the Emmys, you dealt with what's on ABC, NBC, and CBS. And that was pretty much it.
Maybe like Fox or something.
Yeah, maybe Fox like later on down the line. But, I mean, it was pretty much a more narrow playing field. You didn't have all these different like content creators basically coming out. I mean, what's next? Are YouTube series going to be part of it now,
Well,
too?
that's
What about Cobra Kai?
I was just about to say that because, like, why isn't that in the running?
Well,
or
and
who says it?
I mean, yeah. And that should be. Like, if
Yeah.
anything should be, Cobra Kai definitely should be in there. And, I mean, the fact that it's moving to Netflix is really exciting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I know seasons 1 and 2 are going to come out in September on Netflix now. So now some of my friends who didn't want to pay for YouTube can actually finally watch it. But then season 3 is going to come out on Netflix at some point. I mean, there's been theories that it could be December. It could even be earlier. I mean, I don't know. Why would you release the first 2 seasons? But then again, because that is like 20 episodes or something, they want to give people time to watch all that.
I was just about to say, yeah, if you're trying to get, especially they're moving to this new platform, then
Sure.
you have to kind of give people.
You got to get all those viewers.
Yep. Definitely.
So I mean, you can, and maybe in December that is a good time to do it.
Yeah, because I was just telling my friend about it. He was like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah, man. Like, it's like, no way. I'm like, yeah, it's sweet. It's like, it's coming to Netflix. Just give it a second. He's like, oh,
Yeah, right.
Definitely. I can't wait for that. So yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting. But I would agree and say maybe 7 out of the 15, and that would be a good. That's a good take.
And that's still a good number.
That's
Look,
a
if
great
it only
take-home.
wins 3, that would be great.
Yeah.
Or 1. No, I mean, that might be a little pathetic if you're nominated for 15. Then it becomes like, is it a participation trophy?
Get a ribbon.
You tried, but I mean, who knows? All right, what do we got next?
So next, we're gonna talk about Solo. And I'm sorry.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. We're talking about the High Republic.
But we will talk about Solo.
Jumping the gun there. My bads.
Yeah, the High Republic. This story is actually pretty interesting to me, too.
Yeah, so what they're saying is that Lawrence Santeca, like his clan or his tribe or whatnot, were actually a part of the original High Republic. So for those of you who may not remember, that's the guy at the very beginning of
Yeah, that was the
Force
like
Awakens.
5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, 5 minutes of screen time. He's the one
But he
who
did
gave,
have a lot of comic book time.
Yeah, he did. He gave Poe Dameron like the flash drive, I guess, of where Luke Skywalker was supposed to be located. And but in the comic book, as Eric said, he did actually have a couple of adventures with Luke, as far as rebuilding the Jedi Order and everything like that, and then of course dealing with Kylo and whatnot.
Well, here's the thing that cracks me up. So here's a guy that has literally maybe 5 minutes.
I know, but he's got all this stuff.
But it's so weighty.
Yeah.
Because in those few lines of dialogue, you see that he knew Princess Leia. You know, he was like very much entrenched probably with that family, with the Skywalkers more than likely. There's so much history this guy is giving.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, but they got a predominantly good, like, amazing actor to play him, and it's like, did you need it for that short period of time?
Yeah, and what's sad is he's passed away now since
Yeah,
then.
exactly.
And so
So
now
it's
it's
like,
kind of like, well, if you're going to feature him, you got to recast him anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was it, right. Why would you waste Max von Sydow in that kind of a role?
Exactly.
I mean, did you really need the... But hey... You know what it could have been? He maybe does another one of those, hey, man, I want to be in Star Wars. Make me a stormtrooper. And they're like, oh, you know what? You need to be this guy.
Or like even like Benicio del Toro. Like, you could have got anybody to play that guy.
Sure.
But you didn't need someone of his acting ability to play that.
No,
role.
and sometimes what that does is that actually gets your hopes up.
Exactly.
Like, okay, this is going to be someone really cool. And you're like, dude, anybody like out of acting school could have done this.
Or the guy who played... was it General? He was in Rise of Skywalker. He was
Pride.
Yeah, General Pride. I keep getting Pride and Price mixed up. Price is the chick.
Oh yeah, Governor Price.
Governor Price.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, once again, like, he really didn't do much.
No.
It's like, why are we wasting, like...
Well, but then again, it depends
mean,
on how you look at things. Because again, I will say, he didn't have a whole lot of screen time, but it was actually meaty because you find out he's serving Palpatine behind the scenes all along, unbeknownst to even Kylo.
Yeah.
And he was part of the old guard. So again, there's like a really rich history there.
Not only that, but he did find out the mole was...
He did find out Hux, and he dispatched him really quick. So, I mean, I'll give him, because again, not everybody who shows up in a movie has to be... That's why I always go back and forth on this whole, like, Rose thing. Mm-hmm. The whole Rose Tico thing. It's kind of like everybody's like, oh, in Rise of Skywalker, she was wasted or whatever. It's like, why? Why does every character that's introduced have to be in the movie for a half hour,
Well, my thing is, like, I don't mind that because I get, like, sometimes people are just are transports, if you will.
Right.
But my thing is, like, don't bring in, like, Denzel Washington for, like, 2 seconds just to say you had Denzel Washington in there. Like, that's going to disappoint me. It's like, okay, if you're going to give me Denzel, then give me Denzel.
See, but this is another thing that contrasts the original trilogy or George Lucas's thing.
Right.
He didn't want name actors.
Right,
in there.
exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, now, when we saw Sam Jackson, at least he had a pivotal role, and he was in there significantly.
Yeah, now, and the thing
And
that's
throughout the whole
ironic
trilogy.
is that he was one that said, make me a stormtrooper or something, and Lucas is like, nah, I got a better one for you.
Yeah.
Now,
But
Daniel Craig, on the other hand, got to be a stormtrooper.
Exactly.
And again, now that's better. If you're just putting somebody in there because they really want to be in there,
Right.
and, it's
We didn't even
virtually
see him,
uncredited, we didn't see him, we don't know it's him,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
exactly.
But, yeah, don't, talk about this big actor that's going to be in it, and, you're sitting there thinking it's going to be this crazy cool role, and they're in
And they
there
did that with everybody. Like, even, what's the actress name? Who played Phasma from
Gwendolyn Christie.
Gwendolyn Christie, yeah. Once again, it's like...
Well, I mean,
she was in there, don't get me
no,
wrong, but it was
no,
like a waste.
Don't even get me started on Phasma, because
yeah, it's just like, okay, come
that
on.
one, it's not even the actress that played her.
But the character itself.
The character itself was just such a waste, man. You build up this whole thing,
She's in the marketing.
In all the marketing, and that's another thing. It's kind
Yeah.
of like you're going to lie to us about that, too. I mean, make us think that there's going to be, like, some really big thing going on here, and then you give it to us for, like, maybe, what she might have had, like, 11 minutes, if that.
Right.
And most of that was her dueling Finn and dying.
Right.
And that's the thing. That's what irked me. I mean, I'm going to bring this up because it's too late now. So first you waste her in The Force Awakens. Mm-hmm. And then you kill her. And then you find out, oh, no, just kidding. She survived, only to be underused again and killed again this time.
Yep.
I get it that maybe her role in The Rise of Skywalker, like, she didn't really have any, any future. But I would have preferred one of two things. I would have preferred to either be heavily used in The Force Awakens and then killed off and actually killed. Or another way that you could have done it is do what you did, but then have her have a really, good, solid role in The Last Jedi.
We got a chat from me, man. Yo,
Wow.
What's up, bro? Hey, what's going on, man?
Yeah, man. That's cool. People are still chatting. Make sure you keep checking that because it's not working tonight for some reason. But we're still with you guys. Of course, we're only taking it off of YouTube, right?
Yep.
For all I know, our Twitch people anybody could be chatting. Well, it's always something. But yeah, man, thanks for watching. Make sure you guys are hitting that like and subscribe button and, comment in the comment section. Well, I can imagine what they're commenting right now, but hey. But yeah, that's what I was always saying, is that please, if you're going to use these characters, use them in such a way that it actually, again, you don't want to violate story.
Right.
You do have to stay true to the story. You can't shoehorn in characters just because, you know what, this could be a fan favorite, so let's give them like 20 minutes of screen time. I get that. But, and this is where your point comes in, if you're going to use them in the marketing and heavily market them because they got really cool armor, that's disingenuous.
Exactly.
That's not cool.
No. Yeah, I mean, you built this thing up, and then it's like... Anyway, let's move on.
But wait, so the whole Lord Santeca thing, they're going to tie this into the High Republic.
Yeah, so basically the Santecas are...
Because we just went off on this tangent. We haven't even touched the actual topic that we're talking about on the screen here.
But, let's see. Okay, so the series will have a surprising connection to the sequel trilogy. The High Republic will be an all-new story centered around the Jedi Knights when they were in their prime. As I've explained before, the series will show Jedis almost like Knights of the Round Table and cowboy outlaws.
Why does everything have to tie into one of these trilogies? It's like, did they make a movie about the 1500s or something and say, you know what, it's going to tie into American history? I mean, in no other franchise or something do we have to have this. Why can't the High Republic just be its own thing? Now, I say that, but I don't necessarily... It's like if you're going to do it, it's cool that they're making it somebody like Lord Santeca. It's not yet another Skywalker relative. Or
Right.
Here's Han Solo's like great-great-great-grandmother and how she was a smuggler and that, you know what I mean? It's not
Right.
that bad. And we really never... This could be a case, and this makes me wonder if you're in the writer's room. Because remember that when they did this whole High Republic thing, they got all the authors together and, did it right. Got all of them together. Let's flesh out a story, and then we'll all start taking pieces of it. It makes me wonder if early in that discussion, they didn't have a similar thing where they're saying, hey, that Lord Santeca guy, he was kind of cool. I wonder what his whole deal was. And that could have spawned the entire idea of this other era. Because, yeah, if you think about it, it takes place 200 years before the Phantom Menace?
Yeah.
Okay, he's kind of up there. But still, there could be a tie-in. They might have been okay, let's just say that he was 70 years old in The Force Awakens. So that would have put him around 40 years old or so in Return of the Jedi. Maybe he was 30 or something, around A New Hope time. So obviously, he's not going to go back that far. He's probably not going to go back. He's going to go back somewhere around Episode 3.
Right.
His birth, maybe Episode 2, somewhere in there. So the idea, though, is that if you take his ancestors,
Yeah.
and you then start to weave a story around that.
Yeah, so the story is Charles Soule, one of the co-creators of the High Republic, told StarWars.com in a recent interview that the Santeca clan will have a lot of power in the old galaxy, representing another power player next to the Jedi. Here's a quote. Once just a family of hard-scrabble hyperspace prospectors seeking valuable routes in the outer reaches of the galaxy, he said, the Santeca clan has become a dynasty at the forefront of technologies and techniques that let Chancellor Lena Soh, great galactic republic, continue to expand safely to the new areas. Overseen by Scions Marlin and Velis Santeca, the clan operates in close conjunction with the Republic and becomes crucial to its response to the Great Disaster, but the Santeca have a secret. Their rise did not come without a cost.
And you got to love the name Santeca.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I remember when I first heard that guy's name was Lord Santeca. I'm like, Santeca, that's kind of sweet.
So it sounds like, once again, like one of those mining guild type families, or, you know, like the...
Oh, yeah.
Like, even like Dooku's family, like on Cyrano.
Dooku's family, and then also Urso. Galen Urso.
Galen Urso, yeah.
There was somebody that was related to him that was like that, and then also Governor Price. She basically had a family. You find this out in the Thrawn trilogy, actually, that her family was like a mining type of thing, and you know, that's how they made their wealth, and then the Empire, of course, took it away from them, or somebody took it away from them, but the Empire came and dealt with it. So, yeah, you actually have like these powerful families, and that's somewhat of a cool thing that we don't see a whole lot of in Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's been in some of the canon material, like books and comics and stuff, but it hasn't really been explored in anything other than that, and it's always been like kind of a side note or a subplot. It's never been like the focal point. Like, okay, this family's actually competing with like the Republic or, you know, the Jedi or some like big kind of a thing. It's the whole power play kind of deal.
Well, hate to interrupt you. Ronaldo's back. Hey, Ronaldo, man.
Hey, man.
He gives us the high and the thumbs up. He says all good.
Well, at least we can still talk to you, man. I mean, you know, it's a little... Can't put the comments up on screen, unfortunately, but at least, you know, we're monitoring the chat now, so everything's cool. You know, we're sorry. We'll try to get to the bottom of it. I mean, hey, but at least it worked last week when I was on my own, right?
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think that this is a good positive move. I think that it is cool that you actually have something that's original. Not only is it an original concept, but if you really think of the whole High Republic thing itself, it's something we've never really seen before.
No, it is, and it's something. It's a vast enough universe where you can explore deeply without stepping on the toes of the original trilogy.
Right.
It's a way that you can tell brand new stories, and I think this would be an era that would be really cool. I wonder what that era looks like, because if you look at the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, everything was lived in. Everything kind of looked used and beat up, and you know. But in the prequel trilogy, of course, that was just due to a lot of CG. Everything looked
right. Well, but it was a conscious decision.
It was a conscious decision, and it made sense because everything was like still. You hadn't had the turmoil of the Clone Wars, and you hadn't had the turmoil of the Empire yet. So that made more sense to me. So the fact that everything kind of looked shiny and new and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, like, okay, well, 200 years before that, what did that look like? Like, you would have to create a look for that.
Well, you also had to balance that, because it's like, do they do something similar to what's been done in the Old Republic? Because the Old Republic, whether it becomes canon or not, and it sounds like it is. I mean, if they're putting Revan and stuff in there, it sounds like that even if they don't take the entire Knights of the Old Republic story as it is, that era and its look, they might actually adapt, right? So what is the High Republic? Because that's the bridge between the old and the new. So what's it going to look like?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, what is the galaxy itself kind of look like? So that's
I wonder when they moved all that stuff to January, right?
Yep.
Yeah, great. We have to wait till that comes out now.
I know.
All right, well, now we could finally get to what you were actually clamoring for before you decided to, like, gloss over this one. Now we could talk about Solo. So, yeah, this is actually a pretty interesting thing. You know, it's funny because, now let me just say this about Solo while you're queuing everything up here. So, one of the things I find interesting about Solo, and this has been a general consensus among what I would probably say is a good portion of the Star Wars fans. Okay. So, everybody agrees it's a movie that nobody really wanted. We didn't need this.
Right.
But when they saw it, they're like, you know, it was good. It was a good movie. It was fun. It was a good Star Wars adventure. It wasn't great, but it was really good. We all liked it. And then, obviously, it didn't do as well as at the box office, but besides all the, terrible, venomous stuff that was going on around The Last Jedi, and unfortunately, this movie only came out like 6 months or 5 months, actually, after The Last Jedi, which I think that a lot of the toxicity that had spawned around The Last Jedi, people just didn't want anything to do with Star Wars at that point. But another big thing that I think hurt it probably worse than anything is we didn't see our first glimpse of it, or even a teaser trailer, until like 3 weeks before its release.
Yeah.
What marketing genius decided that was a good idea? And a lot of it would be like, well, we didn't want to step on like The Last Jedi. Because they were still
trying to fix it. That's
right. Well, it's like, well, then don't release it in May then. Wait till the next December. Why, I mean, it really never made sense to me.
I know, but
now something happens. Somewhere down the line, that whole hashtag Make Solo 2 happen starts to come up. So now we're at a standpoint, and we're setting up our discussion here. Now we're at a point in the Star Wars timeline, at least movie making, maybe, where people now want a sequel to this. Because I think people have had time to see it on Netflix and Disney Plus and all this. And again, nobody really hated this movie to begin with. But I think now what's happening is, people have maybe seen it 2, 3, 4 times now. And they're like, wow, these guys were really good in their roles. It was an interesting universe. I kind of want to see the further adventures of these guys. So now we are posing the question, do we make it a movie or do we make it a series?
So, which would you rather have?
Series. Without question.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that is because, first of all, you have to think of all the things that Solo set up. So you have Han and Chewie, who had just met each other, and, they go on the whole adventure and stuff, and then that's when Han makes the stand and says, you know what, okay, this is the life I am going to lead. I'm going to be a smuggler. I'm going to be a smuggler with a heart of gold, basically, but I'm going to be a smuggler, no less. And Solo gave us a glimpse into how he got to that point. But now we need to see where, and at first, I said, we don't really need it because there wasn't a whole lot of growth. But
between then and 4.
Yeah, and I'm starting to walk that back a little bit because I actually just saw, it's funny, I didn't even know you were going to put this on this week's show. I watched it like last weekend.
Okay.
And it amazes me how much you're seeing Han going from just sort of like this carefree criminal, like a petty thief basically, and then he starts to slowly get a purpose. And it's almost like he has a purpose, but then between Solo and then A New Hope, he basically sort of loses that again. And he's just sort of this roguish smuggler that's going out and, just taking care of him and Chewie. And it's also just like how he gets to that point. Because he was brash, but he wasn't yet really skilled.
Yeah.
And Beckett obviously was the one that he was modeling himself after. Because if you look at the Han Solo we know as Harrison Ford, by the time A New Hope comes, this is what I think was really brilliantly done too. I don't know if it's a Lord and Miller thing or if it's something that Ron Howard tweaked when he came in. But if you look at the Beckett character, it was kind of cool that they put a more original trilogy version of Han Solo as almost like Han Solo's mentor.
Yeah.
Or somebody that he at least modeled himself after. But he wasn't. He represented what Han Solo could have been if he didn't have that heart of gold thing. And that's something that I think that Han saw and was like, you know what? There's a lot of things I like about this guy, but there's a lot of things I don't like about this guy. Now, besides Lando, and I would love to see more interaction between Han and Lando going on other, adventures or whatever. You also had the Crimson Dawn connection.
Yep.
With Kira and Vader, or not Vader. Maul. Yeah, I wish, right? So it's kind of like, man, now after Ray Park's little
indiscretion
on Twitter,
yeah, that's
or Instagram, it's unlikely he's going to be back in any capacity to play Maul. So, I mean, we already know that Sam Witwer was the one that was voicing him anyway, because he voiced him in the Clone Wars, he voiced him in Rebels, he voiced him in Solo. So they're probably more than likely going to replace Ray Park as him. But that's all right. I think that we can weather that. But I think that a series would be a lot better because I think that you could get more in depth and you can split off each one of these stories. Each one of these facets. Where in a movie, you run the risk of having to compress too much into one thing.
Yeah, you have to have one congruent storyline, whereas with a series, you can have various episodes to kind of show various situations that he would have to use a different skill set, and you could see his evolution a little bit more clear versus in a 2-hour movie.
Right. Now, again, if they said, okay, look, we're going to make a sequel. I know that's what we're talking about. It's getting late, guys. So we're going to make a trilogy. Like if they said, okay, we're going to make a Solo 2 and 3, and they actually flesh this stuff out, they could get away with doing the movies. They could get away with it, but I still think it would be a better series.
So Ronaldo asked the question, but can Sam do the same amazing moves that Ray can?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, no, probably not. But here's the thing. You could still have Sam Witwer voice him, but you could get another martial artist into the outfit. I mean, that's not a big deal.
True. Ronaldo also made a statement, maybe we won't see any Sith in the High Republic, but we may see some dark side users like the Inquisitors. Yeah, there's supposed to be no Sith in this because the Sith are still extinct at this point.
Right. The Sith are extinct, but there's got to be somebody that comes, and they had brought this up before.
And then he also says the marketing genius was the same guy who had the idea to show Palpatine's message to the galaxy in a Fortnite event. I hear you there, man.
Yeah, you're probably right. And the sad thing is this guy probably got a promotion
right.
at some point.
It's ingenious, man.
It's going to be the next head of Lucasfilm, probably.
Oh, God.
But, I mean, that's where I think that you could probably do a little bit more in a series than even a trilogy of films. Because I think there were certain aspects of Solo that would have been better if it was a little bit able to breathe a little bit more.
Well, yeah, man, that's why I liked your idea, honestly, of, and we've talked about this before, and I actually prefer this way than as opposed to the vice versa, of I'd rather see a movie start a series versus a series start a movie.
Yeah.
Because I feel like once the movie kind of sets that template, now you can flush everything out. And you kind of has already gotten you excited versus, you get so used to things in the series form, you get so used to things kind of keep coming after that. But then you go to a movie, that's kind of almost like a final thing almost.
Yeah, it's, in a way, what you're doing is you're taking the series movie thing. You're almost doing what Marvel did with their movies, where you have all these standalone movies that are furthering this thing, and then you cap it off with an Avengers movie. Mm-hmm. The Avengers movies were always meant to be the end of whatever phase they were on. Now, you could do that very easily using this model, too. So let's just use the Marvel formula of phase 1, 2, and 3 or whatever, right? So you go, okay, Solo Season 1 is phase 1. Okay, and then it ends with a movie. Mm-hmm. Which is the bridge where it's ending the first phase and it's setting up the next one. And now you begin season 2, which would be phase 2, and you can keep it going like that. And that would actually be the way too. And they could do this with almost every one of their stuff. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, a lot of fans really like the whole movie thing. Because that's where Star Wars began.
True.
You have to have
movies.
theatrical Star Wars movies. You have to. Star Wars is a theatrical thing, but we're seeing through The Mandalorian that a TV series is extremely viable.
Yeah.
And it works. Now, what would happen if you took the best of both worlds? If you actually had, and look, you could do it the reverse. So you can have a movie, and then which kind of kicks things off, and then you kind of expound on it in a series.
Yeah, and that's what I would prefer, honestly. Just because it kind of, especially if it's something almost like a new type thing. Like I wouldn't want to see like a Mandalorian movie now because I'm so used to the show format. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I won't want to see.
But not
something.
even if it actually capped off. Like, let's say, okay, we just finished out season 1. What if they had a movie that sort of ended that bookended it, and then it set up the next season?
I mean, you could. I mean, it's no different than when you have a series finale and they make like a 2-hour season finale or something like that. I mean, it's the same thing.
But I agree with you. I would actually rather see, like, okay, so we had Solo. Mm-hmm. Okay, now make the series expand on all the themes that we saw in the movie. Mm-hmm. Then make another movie that takes it to another direction that now you expand on. Because that's the problem with a lot of movies, and especially Star Wars movies. They always introduce all these concepts, and you're like, man, I wish this movie were like 6 hours long.
Right.
Well, this solves that problem, because what you can do is you can have, okay, you remember some of these things that happen in this movie? Well, now we're going to draw them out a little bit. Now we're going to explain a little bit more. We're going to get into more detail. You know, I think that that would be the way to go. Any chats? I'm like paranoid now that.
Nope, I know. I know.
It's like shifting my eyes. Like, okay, is anybody talking? Anybody talking? Anyone? All right. Well, I think it's time to
yes,
move on to one of my favorite segments.
Yes, it is.
All right, you ready, guys? Here we go. All right, so this is our Clear Your Mind segment. This is the one where we actually answer questions that you guys sent us. We usually feature 2 of them. And, of course, you guys are free to not only comment on the questions, but ask any of your own. Because from here on out to the end of the show, this is where all the chatting starts to happen. So what's our first question that somebody, and who sent it in?
The first question comes from Seth Dempsey. His question is, any ideas on how to make Lucasfilm make the Star Wars movies we want? Plenty of books could be made movies.
Oh, man, if I knew the secret to that, trust me, I'd be all over it. Because I think that, now see, this is what people have been bringing up since the old expanded universe.
Yeah, I mean, even going back to the whole Palpatine thing, you know, because remember that Kyber crystal was part of the expanded universe thing.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And, you know, so that was... But see, since that's been disbanded, that's why I didn't bring that up when you were asking, because it's like that.
They did.
And it was
they canonized it though.
They canonized Kyber crystals, but not. That's why he was so powerful.
Well, okay, yeah, that's true.
So
right, because the whole idea was he was wearing one around his neck or something. Yeah, they changed.
I think that was like Splinters of the Mind's Eye or something. I think that's where that.
I think you're right, but I think that they also even brought that up in Heir to the Empire briefly, too. But you're right. I think it was more either Shadows of the Empire or Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
And
it
was something that George Lucas actually was running with. It was actually an unused thing that he brought up that ended up in the expanded universe, and then he just allowed it to happen in that realm.
Yeah.
Because he was originally going to bring it up in the original, or maybe one of the the prequel trilogies. But
well, and then I think that it was... I do think that he put a brilliant spin on it where he's like, no, now the Kyber crystal is what powers lightsabers. And I thought that Rogue One saying it's Kyber crystals that power the Death Star laser, that was a stroke of genius.
Well, I mean, and also because the Kyber crystals does respond to the Force.
Right.
Because that's how Jedi pick their crystals anyway.
Sure.
So it would make sense. I could see it like, okay, Palpatine, especially who Palpatine is, he's like a weird mad scientist in a way. He's always doing something technical. Like whether he's
that was the thing.
Trying to preserve life, he's creating the Death Star, he's creating all these different type of weapons. Like the guy is actually, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, the guy is really a genius. And
yeah, you know what? When we were doing that whole Palpatine discussion, which was like the first hour of the show, it never even occurred to me to bring up the whole scientist part of it, the whole alchemy thing. Yeah,
the alchemy thing. Yeah. Definitely, you know, him trying to create life and he made Snoke's and, you know, all these different things. And it's like, this guy is really always kind of pushing the envelope, so to speak, when it comes to technology. And so the Kyber crystal thing makes sense.
Oh, completely. And that there's so many concepts from the expanded universe, whether you're just talking about certain plot points or something, or if you just want to go into, adapting an entire book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, we're going to take, I, Jedi or whatever, and make it a movie.
Or use like they have the Yuuzhan Vong series, or
the Yuuzhan Vong series, and they're going to have to condense that down a little bit, but now that would make a good series.
Yeah, definitely.
A good Disney Plus series. It could go like 6 seasons or something. Or you could even do, which something that I would love to see is the new canon novels. Your Lords of the Sith.
I was just about to say, those. Oh my God.
I mean, man, you could do, so many of these different books, or the ones that you barely finish, or like the only way that you're ever going to finish these books. I hope they do make a movie out of them, because that's the only way you're going to get to the end of it.
All right,
I'll give you credit, though. At least you're starting, and you do more than one now. You're like, I'm not going to finish them anyway. I'm going to start like 10 books. Why not?
Oh, man.
And at some point, I will jump back into the game. The last one that I finished, I think, was Jedi Lost.
Yeah.
I did finish the comic last night, though.
Well, I hope so. It's a comic.
I know, but I mean, hey, some of them could still get a little
lengthy.
Yeah, well, especially if they're graphic novels, but there you go. That's another one. Graphic. Look, they could take that whole Darth Vader series. Well, any of them. From the 2015, 16, 17, whichever one they want to do, including the one now. That would be incredible.
Yeah. I
mean, so the answer is, if this...
I think we just have to just keep sending them crap. I think if they got enough, just like, how they see, fans kind of come in and going like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we saw this, and then they'll stick it in a movie or something like that. But I think if we really made a push.
I don't know, and I'll tell you why. I think what is actually long been stopping them from doing that is because I think they're trying to leverage as many different stories as they can. So the way they look at it is, well, it's a novel. Now we're going to make a movie on something else. We're not going to make a movie out of a novel because it's almost like recycling.
It's almost redundant.
Yeah, it's redundant, and it's.
I can understand that.
From like a business model, I can somewhat hang with that.
It's like you're paying for the same thing twice, almost.
Right. It's
but
sort
you
of
also
like
make double the money.
Well,
especially if you know it's something that people really want. It's like, because see, that's the thing too. It's like, all right, if you got a good, and the problem with this is that, okay, you have fans who are leaving or are upset with the Star Wars franchise. And if you want to win them back, I think you have to give them something to want to come back to it. So if you give them a book that they all loved and say, hey, we're doing this as a movie now, the only thing is you just can't screw up the movie.
Well, but
other than that, though, I think that will kind of like, okay, yeah, and then maybe that will reinstill some faith and some hope in some people, and then people will say, okay, well, and then because to the fans who are just casual fans, they wouldn't know the difference. They don't read the books anyway.
Well, and that's what I was going to point out. I think one of the other reasons why they don't do it is because really only the hardcore fans. Now, again, I think that it would be a nice thing to throw out to the hardcore fans. But again, if you're talking about a $200 million movie.
Or at least make it a series.
Or even an animated series.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't care, animated or
animated movie even.
Yeah, animated movie, or you could just make it as like.
Or shadow puppets. I don't care. Just do something. I mean, I do think it's criminal, though, that some of the best Star Wars stories are the books.
Yeah.
It's like, well, don't make them into books. Make them into movies.
Or just get the authors to write a book and just like, okay, don't release it. Just make it a movie.
Right. Just give it to us. Yeah. That book is now called a treatment,
Exactly.
And now it's a script. Goodness. They could start with Jedi Lost. It's already a script. Or any of the So here's the thing that I find funny, because if you think about books like Dark Disciple, in particular, well, that was essentially a Clone Wars episode. It was supposed to be.
Well, yeah, Jedi Lost is, like I said.
Jedi Lost, kind of the same thing. It was going to be a Clone Wars episode. So if they could take a Clone Wars episode that was unproduced and make it into a book, why can't they take these books and make them into movies?
That's true.
I don't know.
All right.
All right, who's the next person?
Who's
the next victim of the Sarlacc?
We're going to change the name of the segment.
And it's like, clear your bowels. I don't want to see the graphic for that one.
No. It's Mr. Hanky the Crisp. Anyway.
No, you know what it's reminding me of? That impression that we used to do of Yoda being constipated.
Oh, yes. We won't do it here.
Yeah, it's video, so we'll let that go.
The next question is submitted by Sylvia Garrett. Her question is, do you think Kylo actually had a chance to become the next Vader?
Yeah, that's
kind of a tough one.
That is a tough one.
Because I feel like Vader had so much poise, and I think that's something that Kylo severely lacked.
But do you think,
like, power-wise...
Well, what do you think that they mean by the next Vader, though? Because that can mean a couple of different things.
Well, I mean, I just think overall, just like that intimidation, I believe the power, the command that Vader had.
I think he kind of exhibited, again, I mean, one of the things that I think was really clever about Kylo is that Kylo, no, he wasn't as powerful as Vader or anything like that. But, I mean, he could have grown into, I mean, no Sith... Only Palpatine and maybe one other guy was his power. Vader was one of the most powerful Sith Lords there ever was. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of an unfair thing. But if you're saying could he have gotten into that level, so not as good as Vader maybe, but kind of like the next in line. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, he was on his way.
I mean, I say he could because he was the grandson one.
Sure, well, there is that. Yeah, so there's a family connection.
So you got that family connection. So he already had the power. And even Han said he's got too much of Vader in him. He exhibited, the raw power as we've named, him lifting people up on the ceiling and holding blaster bolts.
Yeah, I mean, he was in a lot of ways he was more aggressive and vicious than Vader ever was.
Well, at least that we saw, except for like Rogue One, that thing that was about.
Well, yeah,
that was kind of like Kylo. Yeah.
But even that, like you said, it was very elegant, graceful. He was,
Yeah, but see, I think one of the things is about Kylo. The problem was that Kylo couldn't embrace the dark because he was trying to be something he wasn't.
That's true.
That's the difference, that's the reason why I said he couldn't be Vader. Because when Vader went all in, he went all in.
Yep, he just didn't do a full commitment. That was the problem.
And I think if Kylo could have done the full commitment, sure.
Oh, yeah, easily. Because look at how bad he was even though he didn't.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think if he actually could have gone all the way over.
But I do have to say, man, and I bring this up every time because I was one of those guys that did not want Kylo to be redeemed. And I have to say, I thought the whole redeemed Kylo going back to Ben Solo thing was cool. I wish there had been more of that.
Well, honestly, I like the way that they did it, though.
Yeah.
The way that because I was just like, okay, how are they going to redeem him?
Yeah, it's true. That was a big question.
That was the big question,
yeah.
And that was the one thing I can say. One thing I can say about Rise of Skywalker, they got that right. Mm-hmm. They got that right by, him being impaled by Rey, and then Rey, using the light side to heal him. But of course, that light side energy also changed him because he was already fighting it anyway. That just kind of pushed him back over the edge to the light side. Yeah, it kind of
reminded him of, how cool it was.
Yeah, and what it could be. And this is like, no, this is what you're really yearning for. And at that point, I think that's when it was like, okay. And then that's why it was so cool when, of course, when he lands on Exegol and he jumps on the chain, he's like, ow. Then
that's still one of the best.
That's still one of the funniest things because you don't expect it.
No, you don't expect it at all. And I think it was just so honest.
It was honest. And
it was honest.
It was but comedic all at the same time. Because it's like, he's this big bad guy like 20 minutes ago. And now he's like, oh. Then, but of course, like, he brings this he takes the saber. He looks at the Knights around. It's like, well, shall we? And I thought that was like the coolest thing. That was shades of like Han.
Well, it was totally like that whole, when Han was doing that shrug to the stormtroopers and stuff. That was kind of an homage to the whole thing, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really dope.
That was good. But, I mean, it's really tough to say because there's so many different variables. But I think in answer to that question, I think that you pretty much hit the nail on the head, that he just didn't fully commit to the dark side, and for that reason, I'm out.
How Shark Tank of you.
Well,
Yes,
like,
I know.
as I was like saying it, I'm like, man, dude, I'm totally getting Shark Tank flashbacks, and I couldn't stop myself because I didn't actually want to say that just now, but I had to because I was compelled by the Force.
Exactly. The other thing, though, one quick thing, though, about the only thing that separates Vader from Kylo is strategy.
Oh, yeah, without question.
Vader was very much a
Way better. But then again, and look at what you were bringing this up earlier when we were talking about Palpatine, and you were talking about the Jedi. Look at his master. He was taught by Palpatine, perhaps one of the greatest strategists of all time.
That is true.
Of either side.
That's true.
You know, I mean, it was Kylo's instructor. Well, there was Luke, but we won't count that because it was really Snoke that sort of twisted his mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, Luke, the thing that I always thought that was really cool about Luke, he had that same regalness, poise, and almost calmness that Vader had.
Well, he had the same like that Obi-Wan had almost.
Yeah, but I mean, it was kind of like that, you know, I'm pretty much the best, and I'm really not worried about anybody that I'm facing kind of a thing. And it was just so cool when Luke actually went up against the Knights of Ren and just dispatched them so easily.
Yeah, it's like,
and the leader, Ren, the guy that was the leader before Kylo, and he was just like, "Whoa, who is this guy?" You know, it's kind of like, okay, we've heard of him, but he's the real deal.
Yep.
You know, because those guys were just so arrogant, and they would kill people for no reason. And they thought that when they went up against Luke,
they were the bullies,
yeah, you're gonna find out, just why we are who we are. And Luke was just all calm, like, well, if you guys, I'm trying to give you a chance to live, but
he pulled the whole Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Pick up a weapon and stand a post.
Right, right. It's just kind of like, look, you guys, you could walk away from this, but I'm telling you right now that if you face me, I'm going to kill you.
Yep.
So.
Ronaldo says the book would be I would like to be adapted as Secrets of the Jedi. It's not a novel, but it could be cool to see how Luke talks about the Old Republic, Clone Wars, and the Jedi from the past. He also says don't know how he would do that, but it would be cool. It may be cool.
Well, I mean, one way that you could do it, because we know that Luke basically at some point locked himself away and tried to go after the Jedi and Sith holocrons. And he started studying a bunch of stuff. So what I would like to see, because I thought the same thing. One of the things that I thought was really cool about The Last Jedi, first of all, when he actually said the name Darth Sidious, I got chills. Because it was another one of those, the sequel trilogy is referencing the prequels. No different than when, Kylo was like, well, maybe we should start using clones again or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, cool, But it was when Luke was talking about, when he was telling Rey about some of the downfalls and the mistakes
The
that the Jedi made.
ideas.
And I was like, it would be kind of cool to get Luke's take on a lot of these different events that had happened before. And, I don't know how they would work that in really, but.
Yeah. Ronaldo also says, well, Kylo was going to become stronger than Vader in the Duel of the Fate script, so it's possible, I guess.
Yeah. And again, one of the things... Now, what would have been interesting is that they had stuck with him being on the dark side and him being more powerful. That, I think, would have been a harder sell for me. See, I can hang with the fact because he is like the... Where are we at now? So he's the great grandson of the Force. I had to go through the lineage. So he's still related directly to the Force in a sense. Because he's a grandson of Anakin Skywalker, who of course was born of the Force. Just catch anybody up that doesn't know where we're going with this. So, okay, you take that, right? Simple. I could see that if he turned to the light side, he would then almost have that Anakin, Luke Skywalker potential in the light side of the Force. So I can hang with him if it's okay, either he had never turned dark or he turned dark and just decided to do that. I can hang with that. What I would have a problem with, though, is that if he was a dark side guy.
What, Kylo?
Yeah, and then being more powerful than Vader.
Why?
Because he wasn't one of the things. Because remember, Vader was on track to be more powerful than Palpatine. In fact, there's canon material that came out recently that points out that he was actually more powerful than Palpatine. Mm-hmm. In fact, Vader is still the only Sith Lord who's ever used red Force lightning. And red Force lightning is like
lethal,
way more powerful than blue, which is what Palpatine and everybody else favors. Mm-hmm. But Vader was the only one who was even able to use it. I think there might have been one other guy. So, I mean, the whole idea was he was super, super, super powerful in the Force. So it would really be unlikely to me that Kylo could ever do that. But again...
Well, I think he could, just simply by what we even said before, even looking at Palpatine. I think if you have... Just without question, Kylo has raw potential.
I'll go with that.
Okay. Kylo is, like we said, the great-grandson of the Force. So everything that Anakin or Luke could have been stands to reason that Kylo could have been.
I could see that.
So I mean, the only thing that separates them is the master aspect.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I say it's unlikely. And plus, Anakin is a direct descendant. Like, he is the child of the Force.
Well, true.
That's purity right there.
That's
it's
purity.
Not mucked up with a bunch of DNA.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. Well, I mean,
it's almost like it degrades over time, kind of a thing.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think also when you look at it from the standpoint of, as we said before, the dark side is a faster way. So if he commit, and that's one of the things we said about Kylo, if he could commit to it, he could have been.
Well, you could look at it from the standpoint of look how powerful he was, and he didn't even commit to it.
That's what I'm saying. He wasn't even a Sith Lord.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So it's like he was that powerful already, and that's why like Snoke and Palpatine, and Palpatine was trying to tell him, like, look, if you just do this, like, you will be. You know, you could be with Vader. He said you could be what your grandfather could not. So if he would have fully immersed, and that was, you know, Vader's thing was like he was immersed in the dark side, but then, you know, of course, with the onset of
I don't know, man. When you see, and, you know, it sounds crazy, but when you actually factor in all these other canon materials, especially the comics, what Vader's able to do, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Vader's taking out like these giant I mean, it's just like the stuff that he's able to do is just mind blowing.
Well, yeah, but that's once again though, it's like he had the raw talent, and yes, he is the son of the Force. So of course, he's definitely super powerful. But on top of that, like he had a master whose master's master was like, you know, that guy. So it's like
I'm gonna have to start.
I know.
Drawing charts and a PowerPoint presentation to go along with this pretty soon.
So that's what I'm saying. Like if Kylo would have sat under Palpatine, I think he could have definitely.
Yeah, but I mean, again,
but
they're
even
saying
if he
in Duel of the Fates, though, you know, he had Snoke. So how is he going to be more powerful than Vader?
He said
Vader was way more disciplined and just, you know, I mean, if you really look at everything that Vader was. Mm-hmm. Especially from Anakin. It's like, even as a Jedi, man, Anakin would have just
mopped the
floor with Kylo, like, without question.
Yeah. Ronaldo says...
you guys are insane.
Have you noticed that the most powerful Force user are the ones born in the light and adapted by the dark and vice versa? Like Anakin, Kylo, and Rey.
Well, I mean, it stands to reason because look at Revan. Revan arguably may have been more powerful than all of them. And that's because if you do the equal parts, and how many discussions have we had about that recently?
Right.
Like entire shows dedicated that if you do the balance thing, what, you know, people have been known to call now like gray Jedi or whatever, you do a little light, a little dark, you combine that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that also has to do with some of the experiences. Because remember, part of the problem with the dark side is that what gives them the power is that uncontrolled rage and anger and hatred and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's like the Incredible Hulk. Like the madder he gets, the stronger he gets.
Right, but that has a downside to it too. Whereas if you're strength and you get this superpower from, more like peace and all this other stuff, it's almost like your state of mind, like everything else, is a little bit better and it's a little stronger because you're stronger. You're not going to burn out so quick.
Yeah.
It's like a sugar rush versus something that gives you sustained energy.
It's a good analogy.
So I think that's the thing. So if you have a sugar rush and then you have something...
Then you crash.
like that one thermogenic I used to take. What was that called?
Cocaine?
No, after that.
Oh, heroin.
It was, something. It was some play on that. But what it was that it was a time release thing.
Yeah.
But what it would do, though, is it would give you like this initial little jolt, and then it would give you a time released. Mm-hmm. I think Hydroxycut did something similar, too.
Welcome to the Muslim Fitness version of
yeah, exactly. Head to Head, a fitness podcast, right? But yeah, these are the kinds of things that I think that if you had the best of both worlds, so you get that little jolt, and then you get something that sustains over time.
Yeah.
You combine that, man. You're gonna really.
Well, yeah, that's why I think that when you look at people who are, there's looking at like what was that, Ahsoka? Mm-hmm. I think Ezra was kind of on his way.
Yeah, Ezra's somebody that a lot of times people don't look at him, but he was at the end of Rebels. He was. He kind of had that Ahsoka transformation, actually. And he went from the annoying little kid thing to being kind of cool, even though I never really liked him as much as Ahsoka, but...
Right. But I think like that whole great Jedi thing, and that's why I always tell people, like, even in life, like, you have to have balance. Like, sometimes people always want you to be the, shall we say, like the Dr. King, all about peace. Sometimes you need to have a little Malcolm in there, though, just to like let people know, like, hey, man, you just can't walk over me. But it's all about that balance in life, and you have to, just juggle those things, and that's what makes, life, or in the Star Wars world, the Force is so complicated.
It's righteous indignation. You can't, there's a way to express it without, losing control and going crazy, and then ending up, and that's what these Jedi.
And that's what made Mace so powerful.
I was just about to say.
Mace so powerful.
Because Mace knew how to incorporate it without letting it overtake him.
Exactly.
It was like he was using it, not it using him.
Exactly.
Anything else in the chats?
Nope. That is it, my friend.
All right. Well, then I think that we're starting to get close to wrapping this thing up.
Yeah. We're all set.
I'm really looking forward to what you're going to come up with next week, though.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. So, like I said, if you guys like what you've seen, you like this conversation we have, chatting with us back and forth live, whether it's through the software we're using or other means, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment in the comment section if you guys are watching the rebroadcast on anything that we've talked about today, because we always like talking to you guys.
Yep.
This has been a really fun show. It was great to have you back this week.
Man, I'm glad to be back.
I like doing the solo shows. I even like the, little overlays that came up with and stuff like that. But I got to say, nothing replaces just that dynamic of us talking back and forth.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
All right. So until next week, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.